Right, we're back for 2026. If you don't know, since we do 1,000,000 episodes of this show, we just extended the little break a little bit more. Still wasn't that much. Like a lot of people took all month off. We took what, 2 weeks off? It's still pretty reasonable, I think. And there was fuck all happening. Unsurprisingly, there's no news from December 26th to like the 2nd of January or whatever is there. There's like, as you say, it's even just still things leaking out now, but it's okay. We'll catch up on everything that did happen in the meantime. And I actually think that since you have made your home the LPL for the last couple of years, let's just start with the LPL, mate, because that was actually one of the few tournaments that was running was the Demacia Cup, obviously.
Yes,
now, I
we
will
had the wrap
say
up of that.
the results of this ended up being way crazier even than the opening stanza was, bro. Like some of the spoiler, just to give people at the outset a ridiculous statement. If you didn't follow at all, right? Maybe you heard on the past episodes we were talking about the new JDG roster, LNG's roster kind of surprised everyone quite a lot. Even BLG without Knight was still able to win some games. Amazingly, of all the teams, it actually was that potentially sus looking fucking IG.
Yeah.
Which didn't even have Rookie that inexplicably in true like CLG Demacia Cup fashion is the best team apparently. Nymaera. So let's just start there.
And more than that,
Fortic carried fucking IG's the best team. No,
and adding on to that, just because it's the craziest thing, this is IG's first tournament win since 2019.
Get me out.
Out. They couldn't do it with the Shy, they couldn't do it with Rookie or Gala and Mako, but motherfucking Photic Dway win Demacia Cup 25 out of nowhere. So yeah, I suppose we probably recap IG's run because they're a team which we didn't expect much from. Yes, they did have I suppose they have most of their LPL team. You know, Wei is still jungler, the bot lane's still there. It's just that with Photic's a player that occasionally has very high highs, but very, very low lows.
The problem is he has really memorable lows, bro. He has the double curse where he didn't just play badly, but it's like everyone remembers the specific games you hinted and stuff. You know what I mean?
Photic is one of the funniest players. He's one of the funniest players because every half a split, he'll remind you, oh my god, this guy's specifically good on something. He's one of the best Senna players. His Senna Tom Kench in early 2022, so spring 22 before playoffs, was exceptional. The Senator Kench was exceptional. His Kalista Renata was amongst some of the best in the world there too. And then he just never reached those highs again. They fell off in playoffs, and that was like one of the real tragedies of V5 being one of the best teams in the LPL very clearly for that regular split, and then they couldn't capitalize on that again. Photic again, when he went to NIP in, well, would this have been 23 or 24? One of the years after. He teamed back up with Rookie in one of the years later when NIP started forming things up. And honestly, this is one of the funniest descriptions of an AD carry player I can give you. In that specific meta, he was an AD carry who was only good on champions that didn't auto-attack. Just off the top of the head, that just sounds so stupid.
But you're in the wrong role, bro. I know.
It's like he was great on Ziggs, he was great on Senna, great on, I guess, Ezreal, a Jhin. You know, you think these champions were like, okay, you really just want to be cast. Are you sure you're not a mage player? Are you sure you don't want to consider doing something different? But if he was on those champions, he was legitimately quite good. So that just made me laugh quite a lot there. And he came off of a year which was really bad, folks. Photic was not good in 25. So coming on to IG, I was thinking, well, all right, Photic's not great. They got a sub mid laner and a guy called Renard who's stepping in for Rookie. How good can this guy be?
It's almost implied at this point, right, that like Rookie presumably vouched for him, but the fact they get to team up for the third time, like it doesn't seem really like they're just springing him on him. It sounds like he actually is in for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which also makes me wonder, by the way, if Photic is like some sort of scrim god or something. Because I know what you mean.
Or a team atmosphere
in every team they played in, if you went to the right period of the year, he did look awesome for at least a month or two. In fact, it was even in whole splits, right? It absolutely was the first team ADC. The problem obviously was it always ended so badly in your brain, you delete it all, don't you?
It's like none of that happened in the important games, so no one cares. If it's regular season for like half a regular split, who gives a damn? And from what I was hearing in terms of the off-season negotiations, you know, IG obviously lost Gala, and they were considering a lot of our AD carries. Now, someone was saying, I can't remember the source to this, but then again, LPL sources are all over the place. So again, take everything here.
Things they heard from someone else
But initially, apparently, they were looking at Doggo. Doggo didn't really want to go back to the LPL, but IG
don't hit that move, though.
Yeah, so the thing about Doggo was like he was a guy that was excellent just before he joined LPL. Then he went into BLG 22, and he actually replaced Uzi because Uzi was not playing great on that team, and that was towards the end of his career. I'm sure there's a lot of external factors to that too. But then he went on to, God, what team was he on in 23? Another team. He was on Ultra Prime for a bit after that, but I can't remember if he was there then. But he really just fell off a cliff. And towards the end of it, we joked about this before, but the PCS got an LCP get like Doggo pentakilling Faker. When I was casting him in LPL, I got 0-1-0 Draven doing nothing for 20 minutes and playing Rammus Yumi bot lane and completely sprinting it down at 2,000 movement speed. So he didn't do well in the LPL, and he didn't want to go back to the LPL, presumably on this offseason, so that move fell through. So they initially thought they might have Doggo. That fell through. Then they were considering between... I can't remember if there was another player they considered after this, but it came down to either 1xN or Photic. And from what I was hearing, 1xN's agency isn't very well liked by IG, and that might have influenced Ross decision making there. So IG chose not to go with 1xN and went for Photic instead. Now, obviously, I talk big about 1xN. I think this guy's great, and I think he's got a real future. Photic, a player which has a history of not really sticking the landing when it comes to important moments. Still, they've teamed up Rookie and Photic there anyway. And I thought, well, okay, maybe we'll get something out of them. But realistically, when Rookie's on the bench, and Sobro is a top laner who's I don't really have much of a read on him, but he's been around kind of the development scene for a little while in LCK challenges. I thought, well, realistically, what are they going to achieve against some teams which actually look much better?
So with that player's obvious, bro. If you look, he is 21 years old, but as you say, he's been in all the challenger teams. So you'd think surely if you were that good at your career, someone would have figured out by now. It seems weird you'd be getting your chance at 21.
Exactly. And so this IG team was pretty cool, and I thought they might be, they might have a respectable finish, but then to suddenly win the whole damn tournament, got to dig into exactly why and how it really surprised me on the day of the finals too. Because they came out 3-1 from their group stage, but it was the weaker group by far. EDG actually looked pretty good coming out of groups. I suppose they kind of fell apart in quarterfinals. LGD actually, I thought they had some good moments too. I wasn't too displeased by them. And then obviously like NIP and WE kind of completely fell apart. WE losing Vampire. Well, they lost both their bot laners. They lost their bot side. The heart of that team's just kind of gone now. So I thought, well, they're coming out of a group in second place, but realistically, is that a bit fake? Our team's going to turn up better in the best of fives. And then they came up in quarterfinals with probably the luckiest draw in top esports with all their substitutes. You're not playing against a full top esports, so they battered them, but they still lost a game to them. And I thought, okay, that's not a great sign. And then he came up against LNG in the semifinals, and I thought, well, 1xN's team, yes, they've had a couple of duff games here or there, and LNG just completely fell apart. They just completely fell apart. I think Croco had an awful series, and this is one of the holdbacks I do have with LNG as a roster, is that they have a couple of like pretty severe failure points. Now, I could definitely see metas where Bulldog falls apart, despite him actually having a pretty good tournament, I think, on the whole through Demacia. His early stages were fine. Croco's the kind of player where if he's not ahead, this guy just capitulates. And Missing is a similar player where if he's on a cold streak of form, can be very detrimental to a team, despite him having very high highs before. So sadly, LNG has completely got blasted. 1xN as well actually played very badly in that semifinals, which I'm, will definitely be looking out to see how that recovers from that point, because I really want to see this guy do well, etc., etc. But this gave me a really kind of weird feeling going into finals of, well, IG have not played against anyone good. Now, their group stage was weak. Their quarterfinals was against an all-sub roster, and at semifinals, LNG just completely exploded. And they're up against JDG, who were smashing every laning phase. They'd been through harder opponents.
Right? They got it all together. You should have won.
Yeah, and I was thinking that, well, their draft started pretty bad, but then Tabe locked in, and it seemed like they got a good read on the meta. Things were looking great, and then the finals were just not competitive. I mean, IG just blasted them. They were ahead in every early game. I think they drafted better for early game, and the team fighting was sublime. This is a real ship of Theseus, IG. You can change whatever players you want. They've had various rosters. I remember in 24, just before they reassembled their kind of like legacy roster, they had completely different players, and they could still team fight the hell out of other teams. It just didn't matter. This team just instilled something in them. They can change coaches, change players. no one remains on this roster for,
it's weird about that, Nymaera. I'll give you a quick sidebar. It actually does remind me, funnily enough, of what people... It's funny because Americans want this in their franchise sports, but it doesn't seem to exist, because when you change everyone out in an American sport, you basically start with a blank slate. But it actually is a famous thing about Premier League teams in football, that teams do want it to be like, not just like the styles like built into the culture of the team, for example. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm a Liverpool fan, and in theory, because Liverpool in theory are never supposed to spend the most money, have the best players, what you do instead is you take the player. Like, the joke is, if you know how the offseason went for Liverpool would normally never get a player like Isak. That player would go to like a Man City. Normally the joke is we would have to get the Ekatike. We'd get like the Diet Isak. That's someone we'd have to hope turn out to be slightly better than expected. So as a result, the style of Liverpool has to be that because you don't have the best players, you just get like good players that are like slightly flawed, and then you let them play in a cavalier fight. I know what you mean, because I have to say, of all the leagues in the history of esports, the LPL legitimately does seem like what you're saying. Even if you change all the pieces, like RNG is a classic example. Like, certain teams just maintain the same logic. And in fact, famously, IG used to always be the top side team as well, didn't they? They never had fucking bot lanes that were proper. So there are weird things that do just almost stick in the sort of archetype of the teams.
Yeah, also, the fun thing about the Premier League, I grew up being a Liverpool supporter, but also, just a fun personal fact about myself, one of my old, like, family members was actually an Arsenal captain, so my family is entirely Arsenal supporters. So there's my family name is actually... I don't know if they changed the art on the outside of it, but there's literally like Hapgood on the outside of the Emirates somewhere on there because of Eddie Hapgood way back when. Anyway, quick sidebar on that. But yes, yeah, when it comes to kind of that continuing that lineage, I actually just don't know how it happens, because is it a coach inspiring the next coach that comes in? Is it actually people that aren't shown on Leaguepedia or whatever, where most people get their access to it? Is it like a manager or someone that hires?
Guy we don't know about.
Exactly. Right. Funnily enough, there was quite... I'm not going to say it was a crazy interview, but there was an interview with one of the... I think it was the HLE general manager over this last couple of weeks, who was talking about the process of who do you hire in both front end and back end, including players and stuff. I think it was the general manager of HLE or someone who's more on the business side of things. And it did kind of kick my brain into motion about, well, actually, who do you hire around these players? Do you hire, people you just never see on stage? For instance, like half the Korean players talk about the chefs which they work with. And I know that's definitely a thing in Europe too. Like having a good, I remember some people be like, oh man, I wish I played for that team because they have a good chef. Weird stuff like that can genuinely change the ethos of a team. Stuff like your team house and the practice environments that you have as well can have sizable impacts. But yeah, particularly with IG, I don't know how they do it. They just always end up being a very fun team fighting team. And yeah, given that they've replaced so many members, I'm not exactly sure how that happened. But I was really impressed with Photic. I think Photic was really good comparative to expectations. I think across the entire tournament, Wei was their best player. No surprise, it's the starting jungler. If this guy gets rolling, oh my god, he was great. And I think the finals was largely a huge jungle diff between Wei and Junjie, which that will be quite worrying for JDG as this big pickup in the jungle. But I think this guy Renard in mid lane, like I don't know where the hell this guy came from, but he really impressed me. He played one of the best stylistic Ahri games that I've seen in a long time. Most Ahri players in pro play kind of slum it a bit, and they just say, well, I've got a safe laning phase, and I'll just follow my jungler when they press the go button. This guy wasn't. Guy was jumping forwards every time. In fact, there was one very funny fight in Game 2 of the finals where he played the Ahri, where he jumped over a dragon wall, missed the charm, but then just did a loop, jumped back around again. He was just going to keep doing it again. He wasn't afraid to play make, and I really appreciate that in a rookie. And for those of you that didn't watch the tournament as well, I believe it was both semi-finals and finals were actually played on stage as well. Not in front of a huge audience, but it was the JDG Arena, so it's the biggest kind of domestic stage that they have. And this guy popped off to the point where I'm thinking, I wouldn't start him over rookie, but if you're going to late into split 1 or split 2, do struggling teams think about picking up this Renard guy? Because he looked good on 3 different champions. He played Ziggs in game 1 to counter the Azir, did completely fine versus Hongq in lane. Game 2, he played the Ahri into the Slayer, had a stunning game, genuinely stunning game. And then the game 3, he played Akali, got shut down a bit early, and then just did Akali plays late game. So 3 very different champions, played very well in a final setting. On stage, yes, I know it's an off-season tournament, but for a fairly unknown player coming up to do this, if I'm like a lower tier team who's got someone who could struggle, let me think. Yeah, maybe something like Hai Chao falls off again on OMG, or whatever happens with Karis on W. I don't know. There are a couple of players you maybe look at and say, yeah, these teams might want to upgrade, and I think Renard could actually see a starting spot in LPL later this year.
Well,
Yeah,
here's the
that's
thing. I don't take it as like, obviously this means nothing to the circuit. It is technically an off-season tournament that's like even technically third party, etc., etc. It doesn't count towards anything to qualify. But to me, it's more just like normally when you start any other league, like when we talk about LEC, for example, like next week, it's sight unseen. Some of these rosters we've never seen sit play a single game together. So I at least like the idea. I get like a mini form guide, and this almost does have the feeling of like a preseason in sports where you have the friendlies and stuff before, and you get a sense like, oh, how's this new guy going to play? You know, is this old guy still good or whatever? So I thought like that's why to me the IG angle is really interesting, because actually when I looked at that roster, if I'm being really cynical, I look and I'm like, mate, there's like 3 good players, assuming Rookie's good this year. They've got Wade's Rookie and Jue. But by the way, I did always think this Jue guy was fucking slept on. He was really
yes,
good.
hugely so.
But actually, if Fortic can play half decent, if he can essentially flat to deceive as he's done many times before, I could at least delude myself this team can be a playoff team and mix it up a bit.
Yeah, in fact, Jue had an interesting offseason too, and I'm trying to look for this one quote he had post-tournament, because he left.
I think you actually left on here. I'll get it for you.
Yeah, if you can get that, because I put it somewhere in there. But he basically got overlooked in off season. And
it's crazy, isn't it? Because bro, I thought everyone saw this guy as like the sleeper at support.
I think this guy is top 5 LPL support, especially with Mako dipping out. So thinking, okay, this guy's got a real good angle. So after winning Demacia Cup, he said, "From a support that no team wanted to the Demacian Cup winner, I think I'm never defined by anyone. I had nothing to begin with, and I will give everything I have now. I am grateful for the trust from IG's management, and I appreciate the support my fans gave me." I mean, fair play, saying that, people overlooked me, I think it's good to kind of keep that in context. I'm very surprised that more teams didn't want this guy. In fact, I seem to remember he had some high prospects, and then top teams kind of locked away their supports earlier than maybe he expected, so he started running out of options. So yeah, I think maybe he could have found himself on a better team, I suppose. But for him to turn up and actually win something, yeah, I'm sure it's great for his confidence.
And just a legit player. Like, actually, if of all the names on the list, that's not a bad one to pick up. I actually kind of fuck with that one. Bearing in mind, they obviously have lost people. And it doesn't look like IG was top of anyone's list for like where they were going in terms of like the off season. I mean, at this point in time, sadly, the problem with a project like that, I can tell you, is when you have someone like Rookie's the only name, like the big name attached. Also, people don't know, is this his last year? Is he just going to tap out halfway through? Is he super more? You never know with those ones, so it's harder to make those moves. I actually think that's where IG sort of fumble in that end of summer into that match against T1, even though the joke is in hindsight, it looks way better. At the time, that actually killed a lot of their hype. I feel like, bro, this is what's sad. It's not even that they had to do anything at Worlds. If they'd have just been in the Swiss and gotten to play the full, like 3 matches, 5 matches, whatever, I feel like it would have done so much for this roster. Whereas, unfortunately, when you think of the end of the year, it's actually hard to take your mind all the way back to the summer regular season where they were beating everyone and there was so much actual potential. Like maybe they could make a Worlds run. It was crazy back then. So actually, I'm just glad there's any angle on IG. I was just kind of worried what this season would be a bit of a write-off,
Especially with RNG and FPX now dipping from 26, you're losing a lot of the tapestry of the LPL. And let's be honest, RNG probably had to go with all the contract shenanigans they've pulled over the years. They really hurt very high-profile players' careers like Ming. I'm trying to remember did MLXG have a court case against them? There were some rumors about Uzi kind of basically being forced into some very difficult situations too. Obviously, Bin and Breed, they had that contract situation post MSI. At various points too. So they've played some contract shenanigans, and while I'm sure a lot of that might have been legal, it definitely didn't help a lot of the players.
Didn't they also have that thing where they were also the ones that at some point, like they actually technically like had only loaned Milky Way initially to FPX,
that was them too.
They also had that one as well. So it's like the only thing they were ever in the headlines for was like trapping people with contracts as well.
Yeah, if they weren't winning MSI, the time you heard about them is basically, it's just like making someone's life really difficult. So then financially, obviously, the wheels came off from RNG eventually. So realistically, they had to go. But as a casual viewer who doesn't engage in anything outside of broadcasts and big tournaments and whatever, losing RNG is a big thing lost, and a lot of the Chinese audience love it. and you can't replace that easily. So
it's why I always said this is where people will not understand the difference between having personal dislike of someone and appreciating their place in the industry and their legacy. Like, put it this way, there are people in esports who are literally like thieves and pieces of shit, but like they actually did do great things in amongst that. It's possible to be multifaceted in that sense. So I always tell people one of the worst days ever for Western League of Legends was when TSM left LCS. Yes. Like, you can, it doesn't even matter if the next day, pick whatever your favorite sports franchise in the world is. Pick Manchester United. Let's say Manchester United announced we're making an LEC team, and you know what? We're actually going to spend the most of any team in all of Europe. We're going to make the best squad ever. That still would not replace. It would take like years to have a chance to ever be TSM, if you know what I mean. So if you ever have these massive orgs, fans do have to think of it like the equivalent in their region. So this would be like if you heard at the end of the year that Cloud9 and Team Liquid are leaving LCS and G2 and Fnatic are leaving LEC. You might laugh about Fnatic now, but again, which is kind of like RNG at this point, you can't replace that history, though, because I always think that's the saddest thing, bro, is in the modern day, I actually even think it's a mistake that people make new esports orgs. If I was ever going to buy an esports org, mate,
buy a legacy org,
buy the one that's gone off the
point.
fucking boil, because then immediately you can then resurrect and have all this cool history to play with and bring legends in as ambassadors. I actually, because I don't think people appreciate, mate. They've heard of all these great teams in the LPL. There's so many big names, but like those names, RNG, you can't lose those, bro. Those are like the building blocks of the league's history. Well,
I mean, now you
really is
that.
like waking up tomorrow in the Premier League and they're like, "Oh, Chelsea just leads the whole league." Like, what? That wouldn't be some minor thing.
That really raises the question of why no one revived something like the Flash Wolves brand for LMS PSC, because that is by far the most recognized. Oh, I guess TPI, I guess from way back when, but I suppose that.
But if you were going to be PSG, it doesn't make any sense why you branded with talent. Just go with Flash Wolves, buy the name and resurrect it. You got the players anyway. You got Maple, etc. Like, it was a slam dunk, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very hard to kind of replicate that kind of real bedrock, because not many orgs. Well, there were only so many orgs that were around since the early days, and only so many that were actually notable enough to make a fan base. So yeah, it seems like EG when they came back, obviously that had a following too. God, I can't remember too many teams that got resurrected like that in League, but yeah, I think that's definitely an angle which could have been explored more. And we haven't even talked about FPX. That's one of the world champion orgs just completely gone. God, they even made their own theme song outside of Phoenix. They got Chrissy Constanza to come in and make their own theme song to come into, basically. So looping back around to IG, this is why, even though this IG clearly has a lower ceiling than last year. Clearly, I'm not saying anything different to that. They need to be relevant. They just bluntly need to be relevant. You need your top teams to be relevant. Like, it kind of sucked when JDG had like a quite poor 24, because suddenly you don't get to keep on BLG versus JDG or JDG versus Top Esports. And of course, Top Esports taking pretty down year in 23, right? Which was actually when Rookie was on them, because Wayward just fell off a cliff and Tien was not playing great and a whole bunch of other things, right? When you have big teams like this explode, LNG, another team which I'd love to see doing well, because they had a really good run throughout some of the earlier years in the 2020s, and their 23 team was, obviously, we talked about this before on the show, was one of my favorite teams. I think 23 Summer LNG is a team that was massively slept on. For IG to actually be relevant and to somehow get a tournament win for the first time in 6 years, suddenly the antennas start perking up again. And you think, oh, surely they can't do that again. But it does get you interested in a way that, if, I don't know, let's pick another team. I mean, if a team like BLG actually won, it wouldn't have been that surprising, and it would have just been okay, well, they're just, I suppose that would have had Viper and it would have had some hype to it. But IG being an unexpected winner as a brand which actually carries some power is pretty big. Doing it against JDG, who we thought were the strongest actual altogether roster in the tournaments, at JDG's home ground in Beijing on their own home stage, completely as underdogs, who I thought might get blasted, 3-1, 3-2. That is a pretty big statement, actually. And I actually think every member of IG, to a lesser or greater extent, outplayed their opponent. I think maybe like Sobro over Xiaoshu was he got solo killed a couple of times in early lane. So yeah, Xiaoshu didn't have a bad time of it. But still, Sobro was playing that the shy / Baus shithousery where he was just going behind the tower. He was proxying. He was just he's in the game 3. He ended up stealing Soul Dragon, later on into the game. So he had some, even though I think his body of work was a little lower than Xiaoshu's, his big moments are so funny. I think even then you can say he outvalued Xiaoshu. The rest of the team, I don't think it was that close. Wei destroyed Junja. Of course, Junja and Honkyu coming in with a real head of steam from CFO. I think Renard, yeah, the laning phase was quite even versus Honku, but compared to expectations, Renard massively outperformed. And had some great playmaking too. And then the strongest part of JDG, which I think was their bot lane and laning phase, Gala and Vampire, they were way off. They had a stinker. I think Photic and Dway really heavily outplayed them. So individually, roll for roll, IG outvalued JDG, and of course this achievement means more because of the players they were playing against. And as a team, better team fighters, better early game, better understanding of the map. JDG looked really lost. So I suppose from the JDG perspective, you really want to see a lot more from a lot of individuals on the team. Junja got blasted. I think the bot lane had a good tournament on the whole, but that finals wasn't what they wanted from them. And I think Honku was a little quiet actually towards the end. He wasn't the game changer in a way that you think he could have been on CFO.
One thing that also is that I have to say mildly annoying as someone who's followed Rookie's career, because obviously now I'm looking when this team gets Rookie back, etc., like, you know, what the potential, etc., is, bro, he's one of those players where eventually I have to like almost mildly agree with the hater in this one regard, which even though the hater will never give you this quarter, which is I don't think it is truly the case that Rookie was just the most unlucky player ever. I do think, by the way, I do actually think he is easily a contender for one of the most unlucky star players I've ever seen in any team sport.
100%.
It is like we're talking about here, mate. The amount of times people weren't even bad at the beginning. Like Wayward tricked 2 different teams, if you don't know, guys. He did it a night as well. Like he would just have part of a year at the beginning where he looked actually dynamite, and then at the end he was so bad you were like, this almost looks like fucking match fixing, mate. So one of the weirdest things that I will say about Rookie's career is though he seems to himself have had bad taste in what teams to stay on, who to let join. So, like, basically, I'm almost certain he could, in his team, have had a massive amount of influence. It's maybe even implied he did. But just like this year with the Saboro guy, it's like, mate, how many times do rookie squads just end up with like a new player in the team? You know what I mean? Like a brand new, fresh rookie, like not obviously the name of the mid laner, as in like a beginning player. And like, if people don't know, Photic was that years ago. He was a guy who just came out of Challenger and he was on there. Then you had fucking Wayward himself, mate. And then it's actually, that's the one area I do look at Rookie's career and I'm like, it's hard to tell. Is it that he's like involved in this and he's just bad taste in, you know, up and coming players? Because that happens. I can tell you in Counter-Strike that happens all the time. What happens is you just played the right guy in the right 3 scrims and he dominates you like, this is the next top player. But it's not the same as buying like in a proven quantity on the market. They did it in another squad. Or even worse, he might be the opposite, which is there are also superstars who do this as well, where they almost like feel like it's morally wrong to like put your finger on the scale, as it were. They try to just be like, hey,
I'm just here to play the game. I don't need to do this industry stuff.
You know, you recruit the player. It's like, mate, I hate both those angles, because one is like either you have terrible taste, or 2, you're just letting someone else play God with your career every year. Because that's the only part I don't get. Like the reason why I was hyped about last year, we can finally say that, last year's IG roster, is that was one of the only years, bro, where every name just looked good on paper. Like I was cool when they, if I even said this to you out at the beginning of last year, mate, whether this team wins or loses, I will accept the result. I will never at the end be like a little bitch. These players all looked excellent on paper. Again, we're going into more of a traditional rookie year now, where it's like you just have to hope certain people are just better than you expect.
There are a couple of players on the shortlist for worst considered career moves. And I think that Rookie is probably, sadly, top of that. I think the other players you can think of from recent years, I think Larson from Europe is a player who you think actually had very high stock value, never really managed to capitalize on it. He had that one title win in 22 summer, and then he just slowly declined, and the rosters got worse, and he achieved very little, which is very, very sad. I think you could argue Humanoid maybe is on that list too with the Fnatic stuff, because again, he's another one. But I think that one's maybe a little bit more all over the place, because actually I think the rosters should have been good.
In hindsight,
but that's in hindsight. And then you have someone like BDD, who had teams like Nongshim, and you look at some of his recent years, and now he's obviously stayed on KT, and you think, all right, okay.
By the way, on some level, these guys must actually be on some fucking Zen Buddhism level. I don't know how they do it. Like, he must be the most fucking tranquil guy ever.
Did you see that quote from him?
Some of these rosters,
did you see that quote where he said, "I've never smoked, but playing on Nongshim made me want to start"?
Okay.
Like, Jesus, the Zen has been disrupted. Right. The flow of cosmic energy.
Like sins in his case, then. Okay, there you go. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh god, you compare that to someone like Yagao, who was very famous, where after a game he'd just go outside and have a cigarette and a Red Bull. Like, I love that guy for just being so mask off. Like, I'm just outside having a chill. Oh man, I miss that guy. He would have been I do actually miss that guy.
Him just sound like what he was, like a blue collar fucking worker. Like, just do my best, boss. Yeah.
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
I like it.
I think particularly when it comes to rookie, yeah, I mean, there are some periods of history you just think, why did he stay with that roster for so long? And I think particularly the Kid and Kitty's roster for God, how did that?
By the way, in general, it was the IG bot lanes. They had that one, and then it was the year when they just let that like fucking what was his name like. Oh, fucking
what Puff was it?
Puff and Southwind or whatever.
Southwind was the egregious.
That was like,
yes.
Bro, you realize a year ago you were like the LPL champion. What are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we playing with these players?
Oh man,
I almost feel like, bro, for real. I almost feel like he should have been more of a diva. You know what I mean? Made demands.
No, I agree. Throw your weights around. Yeah, for sure. I mean, now I do think that some players do overcook with that, and they just don't know how to build rosters. And maybe it's the case that these players are actually just of that archetype where they don't know how to build rosters. And they take their hands off, and it just so happens that the teams that show attached to other agents also don't know that. It's just a really bad coincidence. However, yeah, I mean, you have to take control of your career, especially if you are one of the best players of all time, or one of the best people in your region, or just in your role. You do need to cash in that value at some point. And, Rookie had a good year last year, and that roster was good. I'm glad that happened. But for this to kind of come round to this point again, as you were saying, where it is that typical Rookie year of, we roll the dice and hope that he has a good half a split. Maybe he'll finally make it. It just doesn't feel very satisfying for a player of his caliber.
I'll tell you why as well, Nymaera. Like, here's one thing plebs don't seem to realise. I'm not under any delusion Rookie's in his prime. That ended about like 2 or 3 years ago, mate. Look, he had a very long prime. He's extremely good. He was like truly elite for a solid like 6, 7 years. That's why I always say for me, he was the best player ever. Like, I don't think anyone ever did it as long at the top level with. And I also even add in, I think it's a degree of difficult when you're a Korean and you go and play the LPL teams. And in his case, it's not even like he's not doing the rule away. He's like, make an LPL super team around me. No, he just fucking goes and stays there, BDD style, like we're saying, through the hard times, through the good times. So one of the things I find sad is this, though. At this point, he'd have to be prime Rookie for me to really believe it was possible to win with this roster. That's the issue. Like, I can take it when you're like the super duper godlike player. It's like, look, you need just enough help to maybe win, because you can do it all on your own. Like, yeah, people have to realize Rookie used to be what BDD was last year. He used to be the guy where every game you have a chance as long as he isn't that guy anymore, mate. He can still, look, as you saw in summer, if he gets his shit together, he can still sometimes be like 3rd or 4th best mid. It's not impossible, but he's not going to be like MVP of the league Rookie. I don't think that's even like a reasonable expectation at this point in time. I don't think you have to either. Yeah. It's still enough good players. In fact, even in this squad, as we're seeing, let's see if the jungle support was really good. Maybe that unlocks something.
I think one of the saddest things for Rookie is that he just has a little bit of a wall against Knight, where just he doesn't beat Knight, not in a 1v1, not really on a team sense. There are some players who just have that kind of, I'm not going to quite call it a bogey matchup, but the matchup where it just doesn't work in the same way. I mean, you can argue for Chovy.
Actually, Chovy has it with BDD, right?
Exactly. You can argue with Chovy with BDD. For a long time, you could argue it was
Yagao and Knight was the classic one.
Yagao and Knight, yeah, for sure. Actually, nowadays,
this is my favorite one because you used to watch the two with your eyes and go, "Fuck Knight, bro! You should be like twice as good as this guy. What are you doing? It's nuts."
And I know this story was killed to death at the time over 23, but also the fact that those two came from the same hometown, and like I think
it part of it, doesn't it? Because some like Thorin shit where it's like he just goes in your head or something.
They used to play in the same PC cafe, and then I think it was Yagao kicked Knight off the roll because he was the better mid laner at the time. Said, "Oh, you go play jungle instead." Like there was just so much cool kind of chemistry there and a bunch of material to work with. And you could even argue that Knight, I think, actually against Scout kind of struggled a bit in 23 and 24. But you have these individual player matchups you track and you say, well, actually, you're not performing to the level we expect of you there. And to be the best mid laner in the LPL, you do need to lane well against Knights. And that just doesn't happen for most people. I think one of the most important factors of this year was actually Shanks held his own versus Knight well regionally. There was even one series where, God, was it in spring? It might have been in spring where BLG for a lot of the early part of this year were a team that just didn't put resources mid because Knight would just do it all himself. Fine, you just put all your resources into bot lane, otherwise they're going to fall apart. I'll handle myself. So when then anyone's legend said, well, we're just going to chuck everything into Shanks' lane. He's a resource heavy player if he wants to be anyway. He plays stuff like Rise, Cassiopeia, which want the resources. We're just going to like triple gank mid. And actually, BLG just didn't know what to do with that because it finally overcame the self-sufficiency of Knight, and then Knight crumbled in that series in a very uncharacteristic way for him. And for once, BLG just didn't have this kind of all-star shining light in the mid lane that could carry them through hell and high water, really. So yeah, when it comes to background to Rookie, I think, was for large parts of summer on MVP caliber performance. it was held back by the fact that I just don't think he could get it done against Knight. He couldn't definitively say he was the best mid laner because he just couldn't get it done against Knight, even if Knight across the average was playing worse than him, I think, on that. So yeah, I mean, Rookie coming back into this team, I don't know what will happen with the new meta. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of changes. I mean, the league starts on the 14th or so, right? It seems like everything else is starting up around then. So you have a short time to figure out all of the changes to the game. We have no idea whether IG will keep that chemistry together. But I do bloody well hope for his sake, and also just for the fan base's sake, that IG can actually be relevant, because it's just a much more fun league when IG are relevant.
Absolutely. And then just to touch on a couple of the other ones, but we'll move off the Demacia Cup stuff. I also think this is where the trick of not playing your whole roster will always fucking end up working out well, because basically if you win, like the joke is someone like BLG could have even done it.
What,
then
Schrodinger's performance?
Lol, imagine what I'd be like with the real roster. But then if you lose, like BLG, etc., you get to go like, well, didn't have the real roster, do this, what can I do? So actually it works in IG's favor. But here's where it doesn't work though. If you people like Weibo, you just put your real roster in, bruh. Like, for you to not even make the playoffs makes you look stupid as fuck. Like, look, here's what's sad. I want to encourage teams to put their whole roster in. I like seeing the real team, Nymaera, so I get a sense who can I hype, all the rest. But that's really embarrassing, bro, because I wanted to believe in this squad. Come on.
It's so funny that Weber rocked up, beat BLG with Viper, beat JDG, lost to LNG and OMG, just pieced out, just completely. Well, I think, because the last
ruined everyone else's tournament was the point of that.
Which is, by the way, exactly what they did in LPL Summer, where they torpedo anyone's legend. We even talked, the last time we had an episode, we talked about how Weibo, they upset JDG. Wow, incredible. But also there was just that slight antenna raise of Weibo always do the funniest thing, and they did knock down anyone's legend into the lower bracket to beat IG in summer playoffs, which sent them into the play-ins. Somewhat felt again that they were just here for the, for the memes, really. And yeah, you could see their upper value looked pretty good, and then they just had zero synergy in vast other moments too, leaving us with a completely non-answer for them, because just like always, Weibo just refused to give you any semblance of consistency. I mean, I guess Zucker had some good games on the Zahen, the new champion, and then looked ass on others. I mean, what can you say about that? JJ, when he got ahead of the game, looked really good. Maybe that's actually the biggest thing, actually. Weibo looked good when JJ's ahead of the game. Besides that, much like IG in 25 as well, because obviously he was on that roster. If JJ's not ahead of the game, I think teams with him on struggle to push in the right direction. So that'll probably be my one takeaway for this team, which sucks, because I'd love to know more about a team which actually has a bunch of players I'm very fond of.
And then the other squad as well, for me, that I actually find a bit of a bomber was, the other way around, actually. You referenced them earlier. The one I did want to shout out for people who didn't watch this tournament, because understandably, it didn't end up being quite as spicy as we hoped it would be. Like you say, the playoffs actually was almost sort of like two teams of like, I mean, you didn't really play anyone good in the playoffs. You just skipped, and then the right upsets happened. In fact, the second group stage killed the tournament, basically, because as we say, all these big names just went out. But the one that actually was a sleeper, I agree, was EDG, bro, because you look at their squad. Now, true, listen, certainly everyone knows Angel and Leave, etc. These are real players, and Angel's more of like 4 or 5 years ago, he was a big name. But like Leave has actually been a sleeper, really good player the whole time, in my opinion. All the rosters he's been on the last few years. He is one who actually, sadly, was fucked over by the whole let's bring Uzi I into every squad, no matter what, and hope it's like 10 years ago or whatever. So that guy always has had talent for me. I always thought he was a good player. But the whole squad played better than expected. This doesn't actually look that bad, mate. This looked like EDG themselves are like next on the line of that. Are they going to leave like the RNGs and FPX of the world? Like right now, this squad actually looks like they've done a decent scouting job, mate.
Quick hit on Leave. Leave sort of did it to himself because he had a bunch of controversies around Spring 23. Because for those of you that weren't around during that time, Leave made burner accounts to flame his jungle, JJ. So now whenever those two play, most of the comments you'll hear are either Leave was right or JJ was right, because they had this, for some reason, beef there. There were also some just random rumors about him.
Also low-key based as fuck. Look, getting caught is not based, but it is sort of based. If you don't know, by the way, I'll even give you a random aside. This is actually something that came out like a couple of weeks ago that will blow people's minds. You know, I've told this story before, because actually the best example, we have one in esports. Famously, Reckless on Twitter has only ever followed either 0 accounts or he follows whatever team he's on, was the classic thing he would do. So it would always say following one, then it'd have like, you know, followed by, it's got to be like 400,000 people there. It would be some outrageous number of followers. So the point is, whenever you do that, a lot of famous people, I think Kanye did this, whenever you do that, what you're actually trying to show people is like, I don't really use social media, you know, I am used by social media. You're doing that sort of thing of like, I don't really follow any of your shit. I'm just here to. But what's funny is I found out behind the scenes that's not true. Actually, he certainly gives off that perception, but actually he uses social media all the time. Apparently, he has like a massive tweet deck with all typos of his name. Sure. He was actually doing it like Aussie Mandy's at the end of Watch Me. He's just watching, oh my God, I'm watching the whole media sphere. Well, here's what's mad. The same thing happened with Michael Jordan, bro. Michael Jordan in an interview said he has a burner account where he actually, look, he tried to make it sound cool like he's Gen Z. He has a burner account where he claims he like rage baits people over like, so the joke is when you're on Twitter and some guy's like, LeBron's better, like, that might actually be Michael Jordan be like, hey, pussy, you don't know shit about MJ. Or like, so the low key, that makes that base. Because if the problem there, like I said, is if you get caught, it's not as cool. It's actually funny as fuck, the idea he was burning, flaming his own teammate. That makes me laugh every time I think of it.
Oh my gosh. There was an actor as well.
I also just love the idea the ADC player's the one using a burner to flame his jungler, even in a fucking pro game. Come on, homie. That's the most classic rivalry in the history of League of Legends, the jungler versus the ADC. Come on.
Yeah, so as far as I was aware, Leave was being set up to be the next big figure of the LPL. Because this guy was on the EDG youth team that was... So I know that the LDL teams have taken a real hit in terms of their talent production because of under 18 gaming laws, whereas LCKCL doesn't have that. But before that point, actually LDL teams were contesting with the Korean teams. In fact, EDG Youth, I want to say they won the ASCI, which is effectively, you know, basically Korea versus China's development teams with some other gas teams from around the second tier. And he won or did very well in a bunch of those tournaments, and this guy was real standout. So when he came in, it was, okay, we are planning everything about our content around him. We want this guy to be a superstar. So when all this controversy came out, it actually torpedoed a lot of LPL plans too, because they thought this guy was going to be their next talisman. Obviously, that wasn't the case. There's a lot of controversy around that. I seem to remember there were even some other rumors put around him. I can't remember. I think they were just proven false, but the long and short of it is there was a lot kind of just undermining a lot of the hype and the work around this player. And then Uzi came in to replace him in summer 23. They barely lost out on Worlds to the Shy's Weibo. So we had the Shy versus Uzi in the last spot for Worlds 23. Very, very hype. That was a very, very hype matchup, having two of the most popular players in the world kind of have such a high tension match. But Leave was kind of left in the shadows a bit. Now, he did make his way back onto what I affectionately call the EDG Doom Squad, which was a bunch of players which really should have been great or should have been okay, and they ended up being one of the worst teams that the LPL has ever seen. So that would have been in early 24, I think it would have been. So that was because it was a pretty stout roster actually overall. It ended up having Leave and Vampire as the bot lane, I seem to remember. Fisher was the mid lane. Monkey was the jungler. It was initially, I think it was actually initially JJ again, but then he fell over.
Like a 10-man roster at one point.
Yeah, they had a crazy roster, and then even their top laner, Solo Kill. It was Ale. Yes,
it was the two of them.
And Solo Kill came in later in the outset. And then the whole thing about this, it was managed by Clearlove, who has had a pretty atrocious
if you look at that 10-man roster, you could definitely make a banging 5-man roster out of that. They could really mix it up.
Especially with how they performed after they left EDG. All of them looked way better. Leave went to NIP. His stint on NIP with Zumbi in 25 was really legit, actually. He was really good. For those of you who want like an example game, there was a spring playoffs game, might have been winter, game 2 versus top esports in the playoffs bracket. He plays Jhin. He only dies once the entire game. They lose the game, but it is Titan levels of effort from him. He was doing some mad carrying. And there were a couple of games across that year where you just think, okay, this guy's really got it. This guy really has it. And a bunch of the other players did very well elsewhere. Obviously, Vampire's now on JDG as well, despite him looking really awful on debut. Monkey, a player who on WE with Vampire actually looked a lot better as well. So pretty much the whole team looked a lot better. And EG have now picked back up Leave, despite him leaving under pretty poor circumstances, I suppose, all that drama. He's comboed up with another player who people might not have heard of. So his name is written Parukia. His name is actually Palkia, named after the Pokemon, because he couldn't name it after a Pokemon for licensing issues. Can't remember if we mentioned that in a previous episode too. But this guy is really legit. I think with Dway, Palkia, and Vampire, they make up like the second string of supports in LPL right now, which I think push the likes of On and Kyle in terms of the top tier supports. These guys are actually pretty good. Now, I don't think LPL's support pool in general is very strong right now, but if Leave and Palkia are actually both high roll, they can be legit, and I think that they can actually be very good contenders. I've already talked very high of Xiaohao before. I think this guy's been like sleeper pretty damn good for a while. Angel you know enough about already, and he's recently been pretty powerful, and then ZDZ somewhat comes as a package deal with Xiaohao. So yeah, overall, this is a team which I think they should be mid-pack, but they could be above that if things really roll well for them. Who do they play in playoffs against? Yeah, they lost to JDG, so that's like honestly not the worst opponent to go out to with JDG on that form. I think that bot lane got a little bit blasted at points just because Gala and Vampo are very good in laning phase. But EDG are definitely, they would be my pick to randomly upset the top teams as a mid-table team. This is that kind of, it gives me that kind of vibes.
Oh, I can say I actually think that's one of the more interesting. Bear in mind, a lot of it sadly was like us trashing the teams that didn't do as well as we hoped they would. That one actually looks half decent, yeah. Looks like they can actually be like at least. What I always say with teams like that is, I just want them to keep the bigger teams honest. I don't want it to be like, and I do think you saw this last.
They don't need to be at MSI, but they need to make our MSI teams good.
I don't want it to be where BLG can just fuck around in the regular season all day long, like even when Bin was shit. But just know that when the playoffs come, the name BLG's in the server, and Knight's going to be better than either mid. Like that's whack, because then when they do get like they did to Worlds, you can't actually believe in them. You have to be like, well, I've seen how bad they can be. Well, I've seen like they can basically play it down to the level of the bottom team. So if you have teams like EDG, maybe even actually LNG and IG now, these squads can actually make the top teams for real good. Because I always think the biggest flaw you have when you project internationally is you can't only look, this is what Western fans make the mistake of every time, you can't only look at the upper end of the curve of like what's possible, because of course the G2s and in past years Team Liquids and FlyQuest, the top end was always that you could compete. But the point is, if you rolled a random die, that isn't what would come up as an average result. The average result would be more like what you see, they just get clapped and they're somewhat convincingly beaten. So I do think for the LPL, I was a little bit worried when I heard, if we go back in time like a month ago, just before you came on the show, like it was looking like, okay, right, you got the super teams, you've done a good job with that, you got the BLG roster, you got a couple of rosters that look really good, but then you don't actually have that much good work done in the middle. I actually think with how it's played out and seeing Demacia Cup, actually LPL looks sleeper pretty good this year, mate. Actually, I think the top end rosters are pretty, you can go 6 or 7 names again. It looks interesting.
Yeah, I think that the mid-table's interesting enough, right? Now, some of them I'm watching just to see if there'll be a really entertaining car crash. If Weibo completely explode, I'm still going to be tuning in, because actually that would just be very noticeable. But yeah, I mean, if BLG get their shit together, obviously that's a team which should be an upgrade from what they had before.
I mean, principally, we discussed on the past one, that one, if it actually works, can do the real LPL thing of like, you can now contest for Worlds. Like, look, I'll never take, when you have rosters like the fucking Gen G roster, I have to look at that and go, you should be number one. But I'll tell you what, once I get past them and maybe Anwar, you can be right in the mix, bro. You can be a dark horse to win Worlds. Yeah.
Even some of the bottom teams gave me a little bit of a surprise in a good way. Like OMG, look all right. You know, their bot lane, Starry looks great. And Moam, despite him really not being good towards the end of his tenure on DK, he looked good on stuff like the Rel again with him. But Starry's another one of those like hotshot AD carries which can genuinely make an impact. So, you know, I'm going to be tuning in for them. There have definitely been points in the past where I look at a couple of bottom tier rosters, I'm like, I'm not really about this. I think that's a little better this time. Of course, we've cut down 2 of the teams. So it's gone down to 14 teams rather than 16, 17 the year before that. So maybe that plays into it a little bit. But yeah, I really hope that the mid-table works out. The format is going to be interesting in regards to that too, because it's another thing similar to this year where you've got top teams versus top teams. They very quickly split out. In fact, compared to last year, they had like random groups of 1 top team, mid-table teams, and then a bottom team playing off single round robin best of 5 last year in winter, which is a very strange format. So we had, I think for the first time in league history, an entire split in a tier 1 region played just in best of 5s, which was kind of wild. this time we've
even
got
the placement matches will be BO5, I remember.
Yeah, all of it in winter was best of fives, which I mean, it's very interesting seeing teams pick up from that. Because I remember way back in the day when everyone was best of one, it really felt like you only saw true League of Legends and a team show its true potential when you got to the best of five. So we did have enough of that, but then the problem was if it's all only between bottom tier teams, it does get quite wearing quite quick.
Sure.
But what happened after that point is that then they split into the different groups. You have an upper and lower group. You would have seen that in LCK as well. But they're splitting out into the upper and lower groups, not into 2 groups, but into 3 for 26 format for the first part of it. And they're doing that from the off. There's no placement in that either, which means that I actually don't know what the mid-table is going to look like because they're not going to have a chance to play the top tier teams, which kind of sucks. And sadly, EDG are not going to be in that top group at first. They'll have to fight their way up to it, which I don't know. That feels like a bit of a lost opportunity. But you can't exactly design a format in the hopes that one of your mid-table teams, which will randomly upset. And on the other side, if it's the other kind of side of the of this equation, really, if you have like a couple of weaker teams in the upper group, you have the LCK situation you had this year. We had like the top 3 teams just completely dunking on the rest of the top group in LCK. But yeah, hopefully the mid-table in LPL actually gets a chance to play the top table teams and keeps up the level of form we hope they can do going towards the end of the split.
By the way, being as it now at this point in time, seemingly every region's embracing that exact format where you like split partway into the split and you make like a super group and a shitter group. I actually think that is a slam dunk for almost everyone who follows the league, because if you're casual, it's easy. Just watch the upper group. And by the way, it actually even allows in the upper. It's why I actually think, sadly, the fact that Gen G didn't win Worlds, well, again, everyone will just delete what happened in their LCK season, which was unbelievable, because once you then got an LPL style super group, they then dominated that. Like, that makes it so if you're dominant, it's even more impressive, bro, because otherwise in the old days where you got 18-0 whatever, but half the games are against shit teams that no one cares about and no one even knows how legit those matches are, etc. If you dominate that upper group, it's super sick. And then also then you only have to dip into the lower group if you're a super fan of those teams, if you're really interested in some weird angle or some one specific player. And by the way, even then there'll be the odd player down there, might be a Jouer type person who's interested, who's got something going for their game, Milky Way in the past. So I find it streamlines viewing the LPL a lot, mate. And there's a concept that people try to always say in my native game of Counter-Strike that I just totally disagree with, right? I've always had this theory that when someone who's like a commentator goes, the problem with these tournaments is it's the same teams playing each other. What they mean is I'm burned out. Like, I've done too many tournaments in a row. And what I mean is I need a month off watching the same game. Because I always tell them, bro, that just isn't even true.
Oh, no, my steak is too juicy. My lobster's too buttery.
I'll give you this example. That would be like someone saying, Formula One, they bloody race every single month. Why don't you just like have one match? Why don't you all race a bunch of separate countries and at the end have one big race? That's shit. That's a movie. Like, you wouldn't, again, tennis, same thing. You want them to play every single month, bro. Like, the best thing is when you have the right. So I personally love it when people keep playing the same matches, even though, yes, you might get what look like boring matches as in there's one-sided. But as I said, to me, that's you show the dominance you have over that guy every time you play him. So I actually love this format. I think it's made the LPL even better to watch, mate.
Yeah, and the onus is on the teams to get better and replace those teams and the rest of it. Now, I do understand you do get a bit hamstringed if you're in the middle or lower group in this case and you don't really have that game time against the upper groups. Maybe you don't get practice time in the same way. But realistically, this also serves another purpose of punishing bottom feeders. It punishes teams which have not put in the effort, which have not developed. Sometimes that will be out of their control, but there are definitely teams which have been sleeping for a long time. I mean, people considered it, I suppose, a little unfair in LEC when there were a couple of teams which stopped their year pretty early into it because
famously Rogue did it one time. If you remember,
that was
like
Rogue.
2 years ago or something.
Yeah, they ended up losing half the year. But that is a punishment. I mean, if you are not going to be there putting up results and providing entertaining gameplay, I think it's actually only natural that more punishing formats come in. Maybe you'd have more inclusive formats where everyone plays each other more if the teams at the bottom of the table made it entertaining. Now, as it happens, I enjoy watching a bit of a low-tier shitfest and just seeing what sticks out of the crazy low-tier games, because sometimes, in a region like LPL, sometimes the bottom-tier teams can still be very entertaining, even if they're not necessarily good. But yeah, I think that this does make it easier in terms of broadcast schedule and just planning things in general. Now, what used to happen was you used to have, well, the whole league play a double round robin as a regular split. And that is a ridiculous amount of games, because remember, that was when they had 17 teams. So you had 17 teams playing 2 best of 3s as your regular split. That was a hell of a lot of games. Yes, that was still why we had 2 splits. But you reach to the point where you're 2/3 of the way through the regular season, and like your sleeping pattern's a mess if you're working on international time zones. People don't know what games are important anymore. The important games are split up way throughout the splits. You can't always tell all the time when the important games are happening. It gets too unwieldy to a point. So yes, when you're running very large leagues, you probably do need to find a way to cut down the amount of games somehow, and I think this is a more elegant way to do it than many others. I actually don't know. Okay, I don't really have my ears to the ground in terms of other esports and what they're doing with their group stage schedules. Has anyone else tried to establish this in terms of other large leagues? I can't remember
Not aware of
anyone
any
speaking
other
about
esport that does it. But as far as I know, if people don't know, the LPL has always been the one that experimented. The LPL did this first like 3 years ago, and then just LCK copied it last year.
I know that LPL takes a lot of hints from the mobile game system of Honor of Kings. I think Honor of Kings is actually where a lot of the LPL takes their hints from, and also that's because KPL, which I think is the Chinese Honor of Kings League, is very, very successful right now, folks. In fact, it's kind of supplanting League in China as the big game. And in fact, I think its regional finals had more in-person viewers in China for the Chinese League than World's Finals did, which is absolutely insane. So LPL does take a lot of hints from Honor of Kings. I even think Honor of Kings had a version of Fearless Draft before League did, actually.
Oh, wow.
So
right.
Yeah. So that's actually one of those. If you want to learn about like random formats and stuff, I actually think Honor of Kings is probably a place where you're going to see a lot of stuff as a precursor.
I mean, if people don't know, that was the one that basically just is League, but then they just made it like with knockoff games or whatever, right? Because I remember that was the one that I think it was even one of those ones where people went to like Riot, like, hey, you should just make this game. They were like, nah, we're not interested. And then the joke is it was massive. Because if you've ever been to Asia, especially China and Korea, it's obvious games like that would be popular because you don't need a fucking PC. People are sat on the underground for like 20 minutes commuting every day. Like you actually see even on the underground ads for it's either that type of game or dungeon crawl games that you can just log in for 10 minutes and just do that.
Because people TFT as well, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Why, the problem with that is you need a full-scale PC to play League. So it's brilliant if you're actually into games, the hardcore. But if you want the casual audience, it makes sense those games succeed.
And then also the other thing was that Wild Rift took a long time to come out. And then the problem was, if you're competing with a game which is doing similar to what you're doing and you're not miles better than it to convince people to shift, if you're years late to the party, you're not going to build up that player base anymore. It's really hard.
No, the most cursed thing in development, bro, is to be like 2 years late and have the better game. It doesn't matter. It's too late at that point. And the other guy's got his foothold. Everyone just plays that game already.
Yeah, especially when it's a live service game as well. You have to continually put effort into it. So yes, obviously Honor of Kings doing very well out in China. And I think that has spurred on LPL to try and just take what it can from Honor of Kings and see if it works in LPL. Just throw something at the wall and
I think they killed it so far, man. Especially because here's the big difference, right? One of the hardest things about getting people to watch the LPL, bro, was they'd never get any momentum built up. When you're the classic format you're talking about, where they would be like 10 plus teams because the league got enormous at a point in time, and then also like a third of them would be shit. That's just reality. And then you'd end up with this scenario where, because it's double round robin of BO3s, you'd have not even just 1 week, bro. Like here's the problem. I always use the analogy of mainstream sports, right? Because in mainstream sports, the casual fan doesn't follow the whole season. What he does is you have what in America is called the televised game, where like the whole country is going to get this massive marquee matchup. Obviously, it happens in England as well. Like if you have Arsenal versus Man City or something, that matchup, right? They'll always place it so, like in theory, everyone could watch it. And the idea is because that's the big match. Actually, people who are fans of other teams will tune in. The problem is if someone tunes in to watch that match, so that happens in the LPL. You'd have like JDG versus BLG or something like that. When you had that match, then it'd be like, if I'm trying to get the guy who watched that one game, the LEC fan, right? Oh, tune in next week. Oh, wait. There'd be like whole weeks time when there was no match. Like I'd be looking at it and be like, well, oh shit, that's TS versus like Ultra Plat. Yeah, maybe not. This oh shit, RNG aren't good anymore. You'd have like whole weeks where there was nothing on the schedule. I'm like, bro, I can't even in good faith tell this guy to watch a match. He's gonna hate it. Whereas when you had that like Ascend group, that was straight fire, mate. As long as they got into a couple of the teams, this match is every week, every single week. There's big games to watch.
Yeah, no, and yeah, when it comes to that kind of format, it just kind of condenses things, right? I also think it's better for player welfare. I think that when you come into the conversations we've had around 3 splits, 3+ international tournaments, because obviously you have third-party stuff now, and then you have, well, this doesn't apply to the LPL teams because they're not really invited to this, but Red Bull League of its own, when you've got teams like T1 flying there or an LEC team or whatever, the schedule just never ends. we used to say this way back in like 2015, 2016. It's just night and day difference compared to the amount of games we have now than then. You have to really just be constantly practicing, because obviously the thing is, if you're playing in particularly the serious tournaments, you have to be practicing for them. You can't turn up and show a bad game. That's just bad. It's bad luck on you. It's bad luck on your team. It's bad luck on the game. So you can't exactly take all time off. Yeah, you might take your practice a little less seriously if it's for a regular season or for a smaller event than it is for Worlds, MSI, what have you. But when it comes to players like Jackie which we referenced in the last episode as well, Mako, some of the older players, which are now getting to the point where they say, okay, I got to take a split off. I think we're finally reaching a breaking point with the amount of games and events. Some players will just say, give me a few months. I need a few months. We don't have that same, particularly in Asian regions, you don't have the same off-season because in the West, you will have players actually take more time to themselves. Don't really have that in LCK LPL because they're constantly practicing. You can't let your mechanics dull. You need to be learning the new matchups. You need to be just constantly grinding solo queue. I don't think there are many players in LCK.
Also, I'm pretty sure in the Asia, they just stay in the fucking same building, really. They don't go home in the same. Whereas, like in Europe, it's classic. You go back home to wherever country you're from.
Yeah,
they'll
take some time.
Bro. They just don't play.
Yeah. No, they might take a weekend or whatever, but it's not like a significant break. Yes. And particularly, for those of you that work pretty grinding schedules, coming back from burnout and from real grind takes a lot longer, especially if you're not well. The art of rest is really quite difficult. I really struggle with it. It's taken me a very long time, and I'm still figuring out how to come back from long periods of burnout. And lots of players who've grown up.
Should I give you piece of advice?
All right, go for it.
I think I actually might have even said it on a past question.
I actually, I remember you having a talk about this.
It's literally that you just have to actually think about like your free time like you would your work time. So when you're being efficient with your calendar and you think, right, well, I'll have a few hours here where I had time off, so I'll put like a big piece of work there. But you have to do that with your actual time off, because essentially my theory goes like this. The real problem is people will do things that aren't actually what I call like restorative when you're taking time off. So the example would be people really are just going to play League all night long and eat a pizza and watch anime on the second monitor. Like, that's not really going to restore you. Listen, it's going to give you a break. It's not the same as doing work, but it also is not going to make you come back like, oh, I'm so refreshed. So what you need to do for real is like actually set aside time to like watch a film you haven't got around to watching, or do something like actually block out like a whole 3 hours to do something for an hour and a half. So there's nothing on either side pressure. Because that's another thing. I don't know about you, but I also find it like if I know I'm doing something after something I'm doing that's fun now, in a way it steals part of like my enjoyment of the moment. I'm thinking, fuck, I've got time later. It's actually why I'm sure you've had the same experience doing esports work. If you know you've got a whole day's worth of stuff, I can't even sort of enjoy the hour before, Nymaera, because my brain's like, hold the energy, we've got to be on form at this time. It does affect us. That would be my tip, is just like, you've got to find a way to like do something like legit good in your time off, not just waste it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people underestimate... Yeah, I think everyone rests in different ways, and you find things different rest for yourself. So what works for one person might not with another. For instance, there's a family friend of mine who he worked crazy hours, and when he moved on from that job, they needed like 4 people to replace him. Like, this guy was working so much. And he had to really look into actively resting. He couldn't, as you were saying, he couldn't just take a block of free time and just exist in it, because actually he'd just be in work mode. So you need to plan things into that time to a certain extent. And I think
he should probably go even more extra. He should really do walk out for an hour in the woods, do fucking flotation, for an hour, do meditation. I probably should do it. Sounds like it's right for him.
I think he flew off to New Zealand for a couple of months, actually. That was his favorite. Bloody hell, I'd love to do that at some point. But for instance, when I was speaking with a lot of the LEC casters this year, Medic was giving me the advice of for him, it was the opposite, saying, have something where you do not have any obligations, because if you're constantly living to obligations, then having your free time being full of them as well just ends up replicating it the same. So I have to say for myself, if I don't have something planned, I will just anxiety my way through it in terms of it'll have to be something I have to do. I'm much better, as you were saying, sitting down and watching a series, which I haven't. I've started watching more anime than I used to, because it's just something I can brain off to, and I can just waste 4 hours, but it is more restful than something else, because I'm still engaging with something, or I catch up with a book, which I wanted to as well. Looping this back around to the whole esports calendar, it's really, really hard for players which just do not have that kind of life experience or those learnings, because they have been in the pro circuit since they've been 16, 17, JackAlove famously was, you know, that Draven streamer from very early years, went pro, and he's effectively been playing non-stop ever since. You can you compare that to players which always go internationally as well. You know, JackAlove wasn't sadly in that list, but you compare that to players who always go internationally. Like, you just don't have a hope of learning a lot of these things if you actually need to put time in to learn them, because it's all consumed by practice. So yeah, I think that combined now in the fact that the LPL has the split one auction, in my mind, I do wonder whether some players are taking a break in split one. One, because they don't necessarily, you know, the rewards of winning split one are less from first down and only a single team can do it. And if you go into the player pool beyond split one, I'm actually not sure if you get an auction then throughout the year. So maybe you can actually get player transfers without dealing with the auction craziness later on. So you get a break, you don't lose as much as a split 2 or a split 3, and you can actually avoid the auction as well, whilst hopefully giving yourself a bit of time to actually instill some of these restful qualities and learnings that are very important.
Now, speaking of, I will segue that, because actually one thing I can tell you about working in esports, and this will apply to everyone who plays esports games, is I'll tell you an actual underrated detail. Get ready to tell your mom. You can actually tell your mom, you're not just wasting your time. Because you know what? When you just play a game, it actually isn't the same as just being on your PC. Like I'm sure people have recognized, if you're actually self-reflective, that when you play a game, like, this is why people have ranked anxiety. When you play like an actual proper game of ranked League of Legends, you sweat a little bit. Of course you do. Like, you're engaged in a way. In fact, a little detail, that's why I say you can tell your mom it's not the same as doing nothing. You actually are on some level mentally working. You know the famous thing that like chess champions have to consume thousands of calories because their brain is for real burning away the calories in the same way as a strong man would physically be doing it, and he has to eat the 6,000 calories. Well, right, if people don't know, it's actually a classic thing about working esports events that it's probably not known. It might look like you just appear on camera and just talk, and you talk about the game, which you like anyway. No, because you have to focus, and you're aware you've got a light on you, and you're aware people are watching, and you're having to be on because you're trying to perform and be at the top of your game and get to that like point where you're in this flow state. So that actually does, by the way, to burn a fuck ton of calories. That's why famously when you work events, you do need a green room stocked with like Kit Kats and fucking food, and people have to keep like the rotation of when the next meal's coming in mind so they don't fuck you over and you go do a 3-hour game and offer. Anyway, the point is, even you at home when you play your ranked game or you play a new video game where you're trying to prove yourself to your friend, or the joke is that girl you know's watching when you're playing in the match and you're the last alive trying to clutch out the 1v2. The point is, you will sweat. You absolutely will sweat. And I know, in like the conversation we just had, people don't take care of themselves when they're gamers. When they're gamers, we're just in our little filthy nest, just fucking grinding away at. When you lose the game, you queue up 2 more games because you can't end on a loss, but then you win and you go, well, fuck it, I might win another one, and then you end up playing 5 more. The point is, at the end of all that, you probably don't do a great job with your hygiene. But Mando have the solution for you, because among their wonderful products, I like this one, the Mando body wipes. I think this is one of the most underrated ones for people who either work in esports or play esports games, because the beauty of these wipes is you just have a little pack like that next to your PC, take out a wipe, and if you don't have, like, you're not going to take 20 minutes off after a bunch of games, just do the wipe, mate. That actually will have so much of an impact on your hygiene. It is nuts. And it means that during a normal day, before you're ready to have your shower for the day, by the way, little base thing, you also shouldn't shower too much. Actually, sometimes the water quality isn't that great. You don't want to put too much through your skin. So actually something like this is also quite useful to just keep things nice and fresh, make sure there's no smell. Remember, you won't know if there's a smell because you're fucking, you're literally entrenched in it, aren't you? The smell is you, but you are the smell. The point is, someone else who walks in that room might be able to smell it. So that's an excellent one. Also, in general, by the way, their deodorants are fucking awesome. Like the whole body deodorant. The beauty of this one is, unlike other ones where you have a spray or a cream, you're like, where can you can just use it everywhere. This was just designed to be put absolutely everywhere, blast it everywhere. And obviously, the beauty of Mando products, if you don't know, is they are especially made to give you way more time in terms of how effective they are. It's not just a thing you have to do like twice. You can go 2 or 3 days and it'll still be effective in that sense, because basically what they figured out at Mando was it's not actually the sweat that causes the smell and the sweat don't have to go hand in hand. You can essentially get rid of the smell while still sweating, and it's not an issue in that regard. So anyway, that's why you don't have to stop yourself sweating. Sweating's an entirely natural way that your body regulates the heat inside of you. In this case, because you're playing a straight fire game of Lee Sin and you're on that 3rd win for your promos, or you're someone who's working in esports and you've just delivered a whole segment where you've free associationed everything, and at the end of it all, you're like, wow, I got away with it again. They're paying me still to talk about bloody video games. games. Hope I never have to get a real job. So anyway, thank you to Mando. I think they're great. I've used it quite a lot. I also like the flavour. By the way, as people can probably tell, I'm not the sort of person who wants like, oh, orange blossom scent. I'm not that guy. So it's not scented stuff. It's just actually like manly smells, just classic smells. I like it. It's in my style. So, and it can last hours and hours and hours, as I say, if you check out the Grundle order meter or so. Some men mask their BO with scents. Mando men get the job done right. Don't mask it, Mando it. Available in retailers near you, or head to shopmando.com, because for a limited time, new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code. Code is obviously summoning. Use code summoning at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Right, okay. Shout out to Mando. Shout out to everyone who purchases some. Also, what I just said was all absolutely true. You actually will find you sweat more. You do need a little bit extra. And it's not just... somehow, this is why actually I don't totally... Look, I do make fun of you. If you have like anxiety to play the video game, you are a fucking pussy. But I do acknowledge that like, it's not the same as just playing a random game. We all know that. Even though I will just point out lastly...
Well, that's why people play ranked.
But here's the problem. That's my problem. This has always been my problem, Nymaera. My number one problem in the history of League of Legends was this, bro. Was when I discovered, when I first played the game, wait a minute, there's an almost mode and no fucker uses it. Like, I can't handle this. Because then when everyone's like, I'm just trying the champ for the first time, get out the fucking ranked game, you idiot. Get into the normals. Like, it's literally designed for that. It's designed to have no pressure. So you can do it. Tell you, that's just one of my pet peeves, that people only play ranked because everyone's obsessed with the little feeling of like, they're winning LPs like a little scratch ticket feel like, oh, I'm a bit greasy. Oh, I won, didn't I? Like, everyone just loves that feeling. You're all just addicted to that feeling. It's why half of you don't even like the game. You're just addicted to that feeling of getting a little win and the game going, have some points, imaginary net points. Like, anyway, the point is now you can clean your shit up, clean it up.
Hey, I mean, hygiene is sorting out your hygiene is one of the best ways to feel better just in general. Like, if you feel like you're just not having a great time, hygiene, legitimately, one of the best things is just fix your hygiene, whatever you have available, even if it's a little bit, whatever you have available makes a lot of difference, and just try and treat yourself better. Genuinely, I know it sounds really condescending, but
look, by the way, I actually think young men need to hear this. Put it this way, if you are someone who at the moment isn't particularly popular when you're around people, one of the first things you should probably do is fix your hygiene for real, like, because that might even just be it. Like, for all you know, for real, they might not even have anything against you, you might not have anything wrong with your personality, you might just actually smell a little bit, and unfortunately, that is the sort of thing that naturally has a disgust response. It just does, I'm afraid.
And that is okay, because that's a natural thing. It's just you will eventually learn how you deal with it, and genuinely that stuff makes a big difference. And the earlier you learn it, the easier it gets, folks, and just make a habit out of it.
We're talking to an audience of fucking nerds, so I feel like we're on safe ground here. You know, we're not. There's a lot of Patrick Batemans out there like, I take a skin peel. Like, no, they're not doing any of that, mate. So the point is, this product, they need it. So anyway, there's actually a bunch of EU stuff now, though. So first of all, let's just do the one where I'll just find where it was. So first of all, right, you know what? I know the obvious way to set this up. Right, guys,
give it to me.
If you're wondering if the whole Los Ratones project was just a one-time thing where no one else would ever do, I mean, look, technically they didn't even invent that concept. Like, obviously there was that streamer team of FlyQuest years ago, Delta Fox or whatever, or Echo Fox, there you go. They've obviously done it a few times in EU anyway. But Los Ratones, the whole point of that one was it was high profile and that it connected like good players in theory with like big name streamers, and it was the idea that like if you do it right you can get some sort of a middle ground. And so obviously that's the reason why I even thought Los Ratones being an NLC made the most sense. Mate, they'd have had to play and practice way harder if they'd have been like an NFL team or something. Like that would be way harder. Also they wouldn't have had the eligibility obviously, but the point is in NLC they could fuck around a bit and essentially they only had to get their shit together for EU Masters, and if they did that they could be relevant, so they could get the best of both worlds. They could have not having to practice but at the same time have a competitive team, same time have like some profile but also not be in the biggest league, but then you can still potentially win the biggest tournament. And now, obviously, the point is, it might even be implied, as long as they don't pull the ladder up, that the LEC versus means actually you can be Los Ratones, the next Los Ratones, and keep getting into the league and show your value. So this just seems so cynical, Nymaera, because Drot, yes, the fucking EU streamer guy, he's made his own fucking team. And listen to what this fucking roster is, boys. This is so cynical, it's nuts. So it's Drot as top lane, Forsen as a fucking jungler. Actually, for real. Then they've got Poor Belter. I don't know what. Listen, Poor Belter, Horby, what's going on with your career? You are a multiple-time LCS champion. You had a pretty good career. He's just there. Jack Spectra, well, I actually thought I'd retired officially. I'm sure he said that like last year or something because he was having all the success doing LEC. I'm almost certain he said I retired. He was a good player, by the way. In fact, if you go back 2 years ago, everyone was telling me he should be back in LEC even. And then Veigar V2, the notorious Veigar V2, who's obviously been like the Cloud9 fucking analyst and shit like that. I think it was Cloud9, was TSM, one of the two. Basically, he's worked behind the scenes. Look, he had his own sad little scandal thing that he got in trouble for when he made inappropriate drugs. But put it this way, I will just say he's one of those people who seems to be vouched for by a lot of legit people in the industry. So they made this, like, the joke is the team is called Four Swines in a Bomb, referencing like an old meme. But like, mate, this roster just looks like we've got Los Ratones at home, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a bunch of streamers and names. Like, what do you think of this role? What do you think? It's obviously going to be in an LCQ. That goes up shit. So what do we say there? Come on.
So this is what I think about this is like, this is the tip of the iceberg. Now, from what a couple of other people have been saying, I actually don't personally know what rosters are around in the NLC, but word is a significant portion of the league is going to be content, influencer, try hard, very low
everyone's
budget.
just following this meta now, right? I say, okay.
Yeah, but I think
it's not bad angle for the league, though. Because like I say, it wasn't the most competitive fucking league.
Yeah,
it was very far from it.
I mean, I actually think the most important implications are not about this specific roster at all. It's just about what teams in an ERL level, like NLC may be a specific example because I just don't think there's any money in the scene anymore. I think that they put a lot of effort into the broadcast last year, and they did actually have a LAN finals in Stockholm with like a K-pop artist playing during. That was weird, by the way. I had a K-pop artist come on midway through the final series, like in the break between game 2 and 3 or something, and they did like a little set with an extended break, which, I mean, sure, pushing the boat out in terms of what you can do in terms of live events and make it into a multimedia thing, but it definitely screams things for purists in the league scene. I think this is a bigger kind of bellwether's not the thing for it, but just a warning sign or a sign of other things in terms of what teams think it is worth doing in a pro League of Legends circuit right now. Because I actually think this could stretch upwards, and it could potentially get to the point where actually maybe even tier 1 teams think that it is just way more efficient and has a higher cap to say, a higher potential rather, to say, just get as much content out as possible. Just get crazy amounts of numbers. Doesn't actually matter about the results. You want eyes on your product. Because Los Ratones, they did do both. That's the big thing for them. But I think the learning for a lot of teams will be, if you're not going to be straight out winning everything on a budget which you can actually put forwards, you need to be getting just huge amounts of novelty views elsewhere. And I think that's where the real crux of this is. We're going to have a lot of novelty in terms of a bunch of different teams trying to field whatever rosters they can with as many big names as they can for as little as they can pay them, with the promise of you're going to get eyes on you and this will be great content. And it's better to do that than field competitive rosters which might actually win EMEA Masters. Now, I don't know whether this was planned before the news came out about LEC Versus, but I just don't think, with the amount of orgs which have gone through NLC, and I think this applies to some other ERLs too. For instance, LVP's had a bunch of orgs cut out. They're changing tournament organizers as well. Now, I don't think they're going towards the whole influencer arc themselves. But yeah, with Los Ratones leaving the NLC, I think the actual firepower of this in terms of content generation has gone through the floor. And I think a lot of teams will realize at some point this novelty will wear off, maybe half a split into a split in. I just can't see how this, unless you actually back it up with genuinely good performances, I just don't see how this is good for the long-term health of the ERL scene. This is a professional Riot sanctioned tournament. Yes, it might be quite fun for some stuff, but folks, Forsen, I believe, is Plat 3 right now. So I think in previous years, he would not have been able to play because of the minimum ranked requirement. That was a thing for a very long time. In fact, there were some quite funny high-profile cases where, was it Teachamar and LPL didn't have a rank above that, despite the fact that he was winning series at the top level of LPL. This guy was a great Galio player, etc., etc. And there are some other players which had to kind of grind up to minimum rank just to be able to play because they just weren't solo queue players or whatever. But there's a difference between that and saying, yeah, folks would like literally putting in like a Plat 3 player or whatever. I was actually remembering back to this. I don't exactly know what Riot's stance on this is anymore, because I was trying to think what had happened to the minimum rank requirement, because I think it might still be in the rulebook. I didn't actually check whether that was the case, but I do know that, remember the player walkout in LCS? They did actually effectively waive that rule for a little while and say anyone of any rank can play in, because so many players had basically threatened to not be available for the LCS and not play for them. And I don't know whether this is a post that thing. Obviously, that was Riot NA. This is not Riot Europe.
And I believe it was even implied in line with what you're saying, that at the time, none of that ended up having to happen. But that was the point, was all these orders were going to like their streamers and stuff and being like, look, would you play if I put you in the fucking LCS team, basically?
Sure. And it was, you know, on Riot's end, I presume anyway, to say there will be players available. You can pick up anyone now at that point. So yes, when it comes to Forsen playing himself, because actually thinking about it, I think Ruddy, who were also in the NLC, obviously that was when, I think that was post Dom's departure from Ruddy's sack.
Oh, was it? I think it was just like not that long. It was towards the end of last year when Don Jake like subbed himself in or whatever.
Don Jake, the owner of Ruddy, ended up subbing himself in while he was like Emerald 3 or something as well, which again, I think that would have broken the minimum ranked requirement rule. So I don't know whether that's just been waived at this point, or whether it's even in the rule books at this point, or if it is and is just not applied or whatever. But yeah, basically what we're seeing is a bunch of players who actually might be quite good, in the likes of, you know, Pobelta, Jack Spectre. Oh, Pobelta will be playing like 200 ping, by the way. What the hell? Because he'll be playing for... Because I don't even think he lives on the East Coast, right? He probably lives...
He lives in LA, yeah.
Which is going to be, what,
you need to live in like New York to even have a chance at this, yeah. No,
yeah, because like, when I play on PBE, but to the PBE servers, I get like 150 to 200 ping or whatever. I'd imagine it's the same the other way around, going on the distance. So Pobelta's not going to be, you know, prime Pobelta. Jack Spectre is actually very good. Sure, he had a year off in broadcast. I think the more interesting implication for Jack is, well, I presume he's been reached out to by LEC. Is he going to do both?
It almost feels like a hint that he's not going to be the mainstay guy on LEC, right? Maybe he's just going to be a guest appearance or something.
Or he's really not taking this seriously because he won't commit the time to actually be good in this, to then be on LEC and then just kind of show up and play games for NLC. Is it one? Is it
it also possibly implies it, like maybe they've even said all you have to do is basically just play the odd score the official game.
Just turn up on the day or whatever. Or he just does it as part of the streaming thing or whatever. But either way, you're getting either Jack's doing something strange with LEC broadcast, because obviously I think he did very well this year, and obviously LEC liked him. He was at multiple road shows, he was at multiple finals, so I presume that he's in, you know, he's definitely someone.
And we just had news, like for example, Goldborg stepping out, so they think it's not there's like an overflow of analysts. He actually could probably need it this year.
Yeah, so Jack is definitely in a position where I think that actually he does have a broadcast future in a way that is quite rare amongst talent. So, you know, what's he doing in regards to that? Has he chosen? We won't know until he says something on that, I suppose. But either way, it doesn't look good for NLC on a competitive level. And I'm just wondering how much the views will actually last. Because as soon as NLC started making tweets and stuff with Lost Returns out, the interaction just went down to 0. And I'm just worried that people are chucking in influencer teams without realizing that actually it only works if you're backed by Caedrel, because trying to get viewers away from, well, not away from, but try and get Caedrel viewers to interact with stuff which isn't Caedrel and is now in a kind of a post-Caedrel Lost Returns NLC is going to be very difficult, because realistically, a lot of his audience are there for him. They're there for his content. They're not necessarily there for League in general. They wouldn't, I mean, one of the great things about Caedrel is that he's convinced a lot of people to watch League stuff when they wouldn't have normally. Now the problem is a lot of people that people would watch League normally maybe are there for Caedrel, so maybe they wouldn't watch NLC at the same time. So it's a real big conundrum, and I'm just not sure NLC. This is not good for the long-term health and competitiveness of NLC, but maybe they get the short-term views out of it to make it worth it. I personally don't see how they convert that into anything notable for the league, sadly.
My problem with this is it can't be a meta that works for everyone by definition. Like there's only so many views to go around. So first of all, if you're going to make a squad, notice this squad itself is already Temu fucking Lost Returns. Like they don't have a Reckless. Remember, I will always quote that stat. In 2024, Reckless was the second most searched name on like fucking Gamepedia or Liquipedia,
Jeez,
whatever.
wow.
Even and the other players were all the T1 stars who actually won Worlds, for fuck's sake. So as in, people searched Kerrier's name less than Reckless, and Reckless was the fucking challenger support player for T1, not the fucking main team. So look, obviously I get like Koreans art search on there, but the point is that shows that he had a level of status way beyond his actual like level in the game. Then you add in people like, remember, that people did have the curiosity of it. It'd been like 4 years since Nemesis had played an official game. Like, will he be any good? Has he leveled up? All these things don't apply to these squads. So first of all, you're already not getting that level of novelty anyway. You are getting the look. One angle that will work is, and I could see this being the team that it works for. A couple of them, it will definitely work, because one thing I want to just like fucking pull back the veil for a second for you fans at home is, please tell me you do understand that all streaming culture is fucking professional wrestling, and that even when they hate each other, they know it's a work. I hope you, please tell me you understand. I'll even give you a better example. Forget esports for a second. When you watch your absolute bollocks fucking slop about politics like Hassan or fucking Destiny or something, understand those people are never actually enemies. They are literally making each other money every time they talk about each other. Like, there's a concept that used to exist in mainstream journalism called churn, right? Which is the idea that like you have to like keep putting out the same stories everyone's putting out, and that's actually one of the most soul crushing parts is you're rewriting a news post that isn't your news post and 10 other people wrote it, but if you're on the site that gets fuck all views, you had to write it, but then you get nothing from it, right? Basically, there's like a drama churn in streaming where it's actually a feature, not a bug, that when you say something on your stream, someone links him that, and then he says something, and then you make a video about all the things he said about you, and then he makes a video back about it, and then your friend jumps in because actually I heard this. That actually, look, even though individually you can see how in isolation that could be organic, they all, the smart ones, understand it. In fact, in the modern day, even though I think people like Pokemon, I'll just say this, I don't think she's very high intelligence, but she definitely understands exactly this type of a cycle, because at this point, bro, some of her tweets definitely are rage bait. Like, there's no way she actually is just naively making some, like, the joke is she'll purposely do a tweet that she knows will make people go mad on her and be like, but that's you doing that. Like when she says about rich people, you know, eat the rich or whatever, like obviously everyone's just going to immediately comment, but you're a millionaire streamer. Like, they get it. So essentially that principle will work in the shot. Like, this team's the most obvious one it should work for. It has famous spicy streamers on it who are going to make comments. It's actually why, by the way, it's funny they got fucked by the eligibility. I actually thought that Whippo going into one of these teams was the most logical move of all time. Like, his actual like quality as an elite international player is now superseded by his ability to be a permanent drama magnet / lolcow. Like, that's actually like a mega feature if you want, again, this sort of traction on everything you do and say in the league. So, but as you say, the problem is, first of all, that's got diminishing returns, mate. Like, you've got to really be at loss returns if you want to maintain that. And even then, I actually do wonder in their case if they could have kept it just going for years. I think eventually that'll get boring, just playing NLC and EU Masters. I think it's why they sort of had to have this LEC versus outlet, and they've even threatened now, like, maybe if that doesn't work, they just leave the whole fucking scene. So I think already people are overestimating. Like again, this can't be 8 teams in a league do this. Like, that won't work. And then lastly, you alluded to it. The other problem is this. The reason I really never had like a problem with Los Ratones is Nemesis and Reckless and those players and Crowley are way better than anyone who's going to be a real, I'm trying to be a competitive player in LECs. You could even argue in their case, by the way, you do actually elevate the league even by bringing them in. Then people have to play against Nemesis and Crowley and Reckless, right? My problem is this. I don't want it to ever be, and this used to be the case like 10 years ago in esports, where social media mattered too much. And there really were stories in LCS of players who were at the challenger level, and then the team decided, I get that old player who's not any good anymore, but he has 50k Twitter followers. The new guy, he hasn't got any social media, but you'd be like, yeah, but competitively, he's the future. Like, that will be the player who in 2 years could be like your championship support, but you're going to take one last split of a crap guy because he has like a little bit of pop now. Like, that's the part I do get concerned about, is the idea that like we're actually potentially taking competitive spots and people. Because I'm with you. I can accept the top end if it brings something to the league. I think it's a value add that Los Ratones did bring. They even brought the viewership. But I know what you mean. If everyone tries silly like streamer / meme teams, eventually we're actually just going to be taking spots from real players and one day might be good. And we need to get in the league through, because remember, it is also a funnel ecosystem to the LEC. And I know what you mean. I am really scared about what you even alluded to that people haven't thought of yet, which is, forget the idea you do a Lost Returns and you get into LEC. The real nightmare, bro, is that someone in LEC just decides this is the meta for real for their LEC team. And now their LEC team is like wonder, but not to be good, just to be a meme. And you know, that's what I don't want. That would be a nightmare, I think. I think I would ruin league.
Yeah, no, there is a certain point where people rolling a dice on a random roster is actually quite entertaining because you're doing something which people don't do. But, you know, imagine, I don't know, imagine like an SK style project, but it's just not good players, you know, in terms of like someone who's just got together people which they have the personal connections with. And I'm again very plainly saying this is not SK because I actually quite like the potential of SK. But imagine like someone bringing a lot of their friends, which just is not a competitive team, and it just ends up being eventually after half a split just not something you want to watch, and that brings down the reputation of the league. It just ends up kind of degrading the reputation of the game in general. And yeah, if it does get to the point where teams realize actually, you know, it's better to be an entertainment product than a competitive product, then the entire ecosystem of league changes. And I think we're vaguely already heading that way, you know? I think with just the general economics of league, we talked about this a lot in one of the, well, I think it was the episode two episodes ago, right? When we talk about Casper Cup and actually, do we need to monetize more league? Do we have to start paywalling stuff? Because actually it just seems that a bunch of teams are not in great spots. I can't remember if we talked about Genji's Arnold saying that even people in the LCK have approached him to say, can I sell my team to you or whatever? He had an interview about something along those lines anyway, in terms of big people really wanting to sell their way out of esports because it just doesn't look like it's working for them. Hell, even the TCL, the Turkish ERL, a couple of big teams today just announced that they're quitting, including Papyrus Supermassive, who've been to Worlds before. I believe Besiktas has said that as well. Now, obviously,
that's
TCL
huge as well.
Yeah,
an enormous squad that is.
Now, I get that they've kind of been, you know, they got demoted to ERL outside of being a minor region, and actually they were one of the better minor regions too. Turkey's
think about how, by the way, they were one of the ones not only did produce loads of LEC talent, including Turkish players, but they had a fuck ton of Koreans over the years with some big names.
That and also didn't Caps play in Turkey for a bit? Didn't a bunch of like
before
big LEC players?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a great region like that, right?
Abadage, a bunch of them did, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of players which I'm forgetting there too, but you know that scene has now reached the point where they realize, well, you know, what are we doing there? Mentioned this earlier, but LVP, the Spanish ERL Superliga, LVP is no longer the tournament organizer. They've moved on to Last Lap, and a couple of weeks ago, Last Lap were like, "Hey, we've got 5 teams confirmed, but there are 3 slots remaining. Please apply." And you're thinking, this is an ERL where you've got teams apply, and this is one of the big ERLs. You've got what, 4 weeks until the league starts, maybe, and you have to apply now. Like that just feels, you know, not like a great sign either. I know that one of the big changes to ERLs this offseason is that you don't have local residency rules anymore, so you can have any number of just any EMEA players playing in any ERL. You don't have to have 2 French players to play in the LFL, which means that now LFL will just be the super ERL, basically, where everyone who actually wants to compete will go to. But yes, I think that the whole ERL system has had a lot of soul searching. NLC has basically just said, okay, full content, get in as many big names as possible to get eyes onto the region. I think a lot of this is, you know, part of it's economically driven. I think sure a lot of it will also be a lot of players realizing that they're realistically not going to get easy shots at LEC. So actually some of them maybe stop pushing as hard. I'm not going to say stop trying, but a bunch of players probably deserved shots a while ago, but LEC teams are quite reticent to pick up players who don't have those connections, interpersonal connections with LEC players. So yeah, this whole ERL-y stuff which happened over the last week or two, it doesn't scream heading in the right direction for me. That's a very milquetoast thing to say, but just generally, there are several factors where I'm like,
we can spin into this. So as you say, like the LVP one's a good angle, because if you even think of this tweet, I'll read out the part where it names the teams that are in. So it says FCB, so Barcelona, Giant X, Movistar Koi, Team Heretics, and then UCAM, right? Guys, those are the 3 biggest Spanish teams, plus fucking Barcelona, people you definitely want involved in your league if you can have a Spanish tournament. Like, the idea that, like, we're just asking, hey, anyone out there want to play is nuts. Right before the season, I'm with you.
This isn't pickup league, folks. No, this is an ERL.
And remember, the perception was, this is why the ERL thing, this is where people have got to always learn to separate business from in-game success. In-game, LVP and LFL were fabulously successful. They promoted so much great great talent. It's the reason why the LEC now is like half Spanish and French, because it got this great talent funnel up. But the problem was, as you've seen by Carmine Corp wanting to get out of LFL into LEC, as you now see by LVP doesn't even exist anymore. Unfortunately, as a business model, it hasn't really worked. It's why I'm not surprised by what you reference. The reason why, to me, it's logical that essentially they say, you know what, fuck it. Before, these were national pipelines of talent. Now they're just the next level of competition. So in the same way as LEC can be players from anywhere in Europe, now every one of these ones can be too. And essentially LFL will just be like a second brand media product, which you just spend a little bit less on, but you can still get value out of it. It's got finals, it's got people. And also, by the way, it will have its own natural meta. Like there will always be certain teams, probably Garmin Corp. There will always be some LFL team will go the French route and have 3 out of the 5 players be French. There'll be some Spanish team will go, we're going to embrace that angle, and we've got the fan base where we want ours to be primarily Spanish. But I even think there's actually positives there, by the way. Like I'll give you an obvious example. I always thought the flaw of the national ERL approach was the ones that aren't very good ERLs just mean that it's way harder to get into LEC. I'll tell you the most obvious two groups of people that have instantly now got a chance at the LEC: Polish and German players. Because the problem is, even though those leagues were very sturdy for a long time, by the time you got even a couple of years back, no one did look at the top prospect from Prime League or the fucking Polish league in the same way as they did an LVP or an LFL star. Like unfortunately, the LFL was the most obvious way into the LEC always. So the joke is, even if you were the best Polish player, you shouldn't play in the fucking Polish league. You should be trying to get on an LFL team and be the mid lane or the top. So in that sense, even though look, it might hurt certain like Spanish and French players, I do think there are some very good players that maybe were in the doldrums now, but will have a chance to get back again. So I don't hate it, but I know what you mean. It's as a general like up or down trajectory. This is a gradual trajectory down at the moment. These are moves to try and rescue it, give it a bit of life, it looks like.
Especially with the ERLs being such a important part of just EMEA as a whole. Like Europe has really used the ERLs well. And going on to the whole kind of, players kind of escaping, kind of getting up to LEC from outside of like LFL and LVP. I mean, that was one of the big wins for someone like Kadui, who was huge in Prime League. He was there for so long, and it took him so long to get towards the LEC. Sadly, I don't think he's got himself a spot for LEC now, but despite him actually being one of the best parts of the SK roster from last year. And, having the local regency rules kind of removed, it helps to a certain degree. But yeah, I just don't think that the reputation of the ERLs is going to be easy to recover at this point. Prime League's also got its issues too, because I believe their tournament organizer in Freecs for You, who did run NLC in 2022, and oh boy, were they a company to work with on a broadcast side, because myself and many of the casters had pretty bad time with them. But I seem to remember there was a tweet or something saying that they'd gone under now as well, and they are the TO which runs Prime League. I don't know where that leaves the Prime League, or whether things will just continue as usual until something changes at a time later. But it just seems that I wonder whether it was just assumed that the ERLs would just keep chugging along with teams like Carmine Corp, MKOI, Los Ratones coming through. I think we're getting towards the end of that pipeline now. I'm not sure how much the ERLs have got left to give with
those teams themselves are in LEC, bro. So it's sort of like they've sort of skipped that to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, LEC versus might breathe some life into them, but I just wonder whether the ERLs are starting to give out now because financially they don't have the power to keep things going. I think that some of the small ERLs are really crumbling. Some of the big teams, I mean, even the bigger ERL teams in previous years when it was a lot better for them were still doing some pretty dodgy stuff, weren't always paying on time. In fact, many ERL teams have been kicked for financial mishandling like that. One of the most important development scenes in the world, it does definitely seem like it's degrading, and that stuff takes a long time to come back. So I really think that if we're heading towards like an influencer content meta, that is not going to be easy to grow back into something which actually produces talent, which in an ideal world, that is the best way to do it.
Because I actually do think in general, that's one area that I think is just obvious will happen eventually, right? Mm. The ERL concept was clearly modeled on the idea of football, that we'd have this like insane level of like verticality as well as horizontal spread across all of Europe. The problem is we can, as pointed out by the LCK example, it's hard to even support the biggest, most viewed leagues in the world in League of Legends. So the idea you're going to have like a sub product that's going to exist in isolation, that's the other point as well. It's not like there's some insane surplus of revenue coming in through LEC and you just, subsidize. No, like actually the top league has its own monetary issues. So I think even though the idea, you know, it's a very Riot idea. Riot, absolutely. I don't even know. I actually haven't talked to a Riot person in about 10 years, mate. I have no idea where they actually are at politically, but they do seem very much like they're idealists. And unfortunately for me, they seem to ignore like the harsh realities that you have to face instead. Because to me, the most obvious thing is more in line with what they're doing now, which is there can't really be like 10 ERLs or whatever. There has to be like 1 or 2, and you got to somewhat make them more concise and pick the right partners as well. So by the way, you can have a couple of these meme teams as long as they bring the actual value, the real streamers, the real people that people want to watch. Or in this case, like a Paul Belter example, but I'd prefer someone in the region, obviously, an actual good player who could look. Here's where it would be cool is if there was almost like a testimonial component. So I'll give you an example. Someone like Larson, maybe Larson doesn't even give a fuck about playing anymore. I don't know, but maybe he wants to. Maybe he can still play and would draw some eyeballs. Then maybe he can be on the stream team. You know what I mean? But aside from that, the rest of them have to basically be just a scaled down version of what LEC teams are. They're trying to run as real businesses with any players they can get from Europe, and they're putting together competitive squads. If you have the versus thing and that's ever a long-term project, that's kind of cool. You get a mini time to make you spike up into LEC and see what you can do there. If there's somewhere to parlay, etc. I don't hate that angle, but I do think, unfortunately, if we're looking at the top end of the funnel and we're having all these issues in the biggest leagues in the world, it's the writing's on the wall. Like it can't survive forever in Europe. But unfortunately, we've seen the best days of the RLs. We've had the best times when they were fucking awesome, and they were, and they absolutely played an important part in history. They will be remembered as such. And I actually think they're even part of the story of the KCs of the world coming to the real LEC now and having people like Calista, etc. It's essential, the story of the RL and the LFL, to have these teams there. But in the future, it does feel like if we're talking like we did in the last episode about League Next or League 2, if we flash forward into 10 years, mate, there's not really a French European regional league. There's like the LFL is like the second league of LEC or something, you know, it's like the championship in football or something. That, I think that has to be the model, not like whatever they were trying before, you know.
Which is what they did with the championship series way back with like, when you had like EU CS, the European Challenger Series, which was where, HGK came through from that. You had a bunch of teams which were around there for a while. Mousesports were there for forever. A bunch of names really tried the best through that. Obviously, that was where we
technically G2 came out eventually.
True, Gamers 2 at the time. And that's when we still had promotion relegation. And obviously, one of the things about ERL is that you can't really do promotion relegation easily unless you're doing it through EMEA Masters. Well, you could just do it through EMEA Masters, actually. No, you could just do it through EMEA Masters. But it doesn't make it as kind of easy to kind of stratify the leagues against each other. But yeah, I mean, EMEA Masters and like just the whole ERL system used to be so much fun. It was so much fun. It was great to, you know, as a caster, meet up with people like Noah from LVP or a bunch of other people from around different ERLs, gather together at these moments and like trade stories and actually make it feel like it was a big event. And you would have, you know, in the past, EU Masters used to have in-person events. It was one of the special things about it. For the first few years, it was held out of a studio in Leicester. That was when we had like the Origin team with Froggen, Forgiven, Insec, Expect, and God, I'm trying to remember who the support was actually. Jezzes. It was Jezzes at that point.
Yes.
And you had a couple of other players kind of come through and have some really fun runs. And then I think the ERLs would have been way more successful if COVID hadn't just screwed in-person events in general. Because if we'd had the ability to kind of prop it up by having these in-person local grassroots events, I think it maybe would have been more self-sustaining at that point. Obviously, you've had some incredible individual initiatives from like Carmine Core and MCOY holding their own in-person events, but not having that kind of centralized event system to kind of get local communities more engaged. I think that's hamstrung it in the end. And I think basically it's been on maintenance mode for a while. I think that's starting to run out in the ERLs. They need a shot of life somewhere. I can't blame them for looking like this, but in the long term, I just can't see this working out in their favor.
By the way, to bring it back to the specific drug tot team, the other reason why this team won't be Los Ratones and dominate the league is actually a really obvious, cynical one, which goes like this. I noticed a lot of people initially zoomed in on the whole Forsen angle, right? They were like, oh, they're going to lose every game. The junglers shit. Like, listen, I don't want to blow your minds, junglers, but yes, absolutely. Spoiler, I've seen pro players do this. Maybe people like Yikes did it earlier in their career, blabber. If you have 3 winning lanes, you can sometimes get carried as a jungler. Oh my God, did he say that? Oh, no, he just said it. But here's the problem. Notice I just said you have to have 3 winning lanes. Their mid lane is going to be on 200 ping homie.
Yeah, a bit difficult.
So I feel like jungle mid, by the way, also in the history of European esports, jungle mid is the whole fucking game in Europe, you idiot. So unfortunately, sadly, the appeal of the joke is this team better talk shit. They better have a million vlogs and drama, because I don't know how they're going to actually win in the game. Surely they're going to have problems with this roster, mate. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is
like best will in the world, 200 pings, 200 ping. You know what I mean?
You know, there's only so much you can do to flash away from skill shots. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically going to be just bot lane trying to just do their absolute best and put out fires on the rest of the map. You know, I think they're actually pretty good individual players, but I just don't see. I don't see how competitively this will ever do. Even if they do well in NLC, because there's a bunch of content teams. NLC going from a region that wins 2 out of the 3 EMEA Masters to then probably just eating shit on the European stage is going to be a lot of whiplash, and it's going to suck. It's going to suck. Because the implication from what I've heard from other people,
because I'm looking online, but I can't see anything. I was hoping there would at least be like a tweet by like Paul Belter, like maybe I come to Europe for a split, so, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
Like that'd be hype angle. You know, maybe he wants a boot camp in Europe or something. I don't know. By the way, I will also say the sad thing about the Paul Belter angle being on 200 ping or whatever it is, I have actually always thought he was actually an underrated player, because he got that problem where, because he wasn't like Jensen, some like super talent that like can compete with like Jawu or whatever, but people made it sound like this guy's shit, and I was always like, he's definitely not shit, but he was always a very good player.
He is an LCS champion.
Really long career, yeah. He had an excellent career.
Yeah, and gosh, I had another thing about that too. I was going to say, but the thing about Pabelta was, I'm pretty sure that Dignitas asked him to. Well, they wanted him to play for
DSG,
them.
I believe, yeah,
or something like that. He wanted to play. Yeah, there was a team in LCS.
I think it was Disguised Toast. I think so.
That wanted him, and he said no. So. Why the hell is he playing for an NLC team after turning down like an LTA LCS offer last year? I'd love to know what went in on those conversations.
Supposedly he turned down the Disguised spot, and there was
Disguised, right? Okay,
LCS or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. Like, what's going on there? You know, and also, I mean, Jack Spectra was meant before he went into broadcast. He was meant to be on Ruddy last year, on Ruddy Sack. It was meant to be, because they ended up with Hums, and that arguably is what caused the downfall of Ruddy, actually, because Hums was just, I mean, credit on him for coming in last minute, but given what they wanted to do, he ended up being the punching bag for a lot of the things which went wrong in that roster. If Jack was there, maybe Ruddy works out in a very different way, which is, again, they were meant to be the other kind of content, but also competitive team in NLC, and it just clearly didn't work out to the level which they wanted. So I have no idea how they've convinced, you know, Pabelta and Jack Spectra and Vega V2 and all these players to come together to do that. I have no idea how they convinced all of them to go into this team at once. I don't actually know what not leverage, but what do they have to bring to the party, you know?
Absolutely. Now, speaking of clown show shit, there's actually a rare instance of Riot themselves being the clowns in this case.
Oh, this is so funny.
Bro, this is why I had to link it to you, because I was like, this isn't even just like being me, it's just funny. It's like, basically, you know, like the old classic meme of like League of Legends, it's like, it's all spaghetti code from 2009 and you can't do nothing because no one knows, because they make it sound like it was like some fucking Lord of the Rings shit, like I was there when the code was made, Gandalf. Like, so anyway, in the same sense, like an actual meme, I actually had that. By the way, here's what's mad, Nymaera. I'm not someone who plays League that often, because I now have a new PC. Sometimes it'll be like 2 a.m. I'll be, fuck it, I'll play a game, you know, whatever. Let's just say I'm amusing myself in other ways. The devil's there. Anyway, point is, I actually had this happen. I tried to log in and it wouldn't work. And I was thinking like, oh, something fucked on my PC. I kept doing that thing, you know, Control-Alt-Delete. It's making 3 instances. None of them are loading. I kept doing it. I couldn't get it to load after that. I thought, like, look, here's the difference. I just figured my PC was fucked. It turns out everyone who tried for those days to log into League would never have been able to. And for actually a reason that was not on our end at all. It was actually on the Riot end, which is that the certificate the client itself has, which presumably in the login process, it just checks against like the main server. Like, is it, because remember, for people who don't know, one thing that makes League of Legends actually quite a unique esport at the time it came out was the idea it was all based on Riot running the server. If you play a game like Counter-Strike, you can have your own server and you can connect to that however you want. You can even have anti-cheat turned off, etc. The whole point is, because in League, famously, not only do you connect to a Riot official server, it's why actually the joke is, by living in the Netherlands, I have better ping than anyone in fucking LEC is the joke. joke because the server's in Amsterdam. Similarly, if you ever went to events back in the day, the reason why not everyone could host like League of Legends esports events, they had to physically bring a server to the actual location that you all connected to, even via the tournament realm, so you didn't have 40 ping or whatever. So anyway, the point is, when it went to check this client, the certificate, the joke was the certificate's out of date, even though it's actually for the real official Riot client. So essentially nobody, if anyone tried on that day, none of us got in. We're all just sat on the outside like, well, shit, no league. So it's not even a massive thing, by the way. It's obviously a thing they'll have just updated. It's no big deal. It's just one of those weird things where I would put it this way. Here's what my cynical take would be, Nymaera. That's one of those things that when some coder guy did the certificate, he was like, well, they won't really be playing in 2026. You know what I mean? It's one of those. It's like the meme of like, you know,
well, this did happen 10 years ago. It did happen 10 years ago. The client certificate expired, and they just thought, "Oh, we'll just chuck 10 years on it. That'll be fine."
Pretty good, yeah.
And just obviously, no one had any like updates issues for this. Maybe the person who did this is long gone because it is 10 years ago. It's a long time to stay in the same company. Funniest thing from this now is they've now updated the certificate for 200 years. Now, it's definitely not going to be their problem now. I'm going to be long gone by the time that thing runs out. You're going to be long gone by the time that comes out, unless we get some real freaky Matrix stuff going on to expand that. But it's just one of those things where it's just a real just head slap moment, though that's a bit awkward. It's embarrassing at best. Vandril, credit to him for like finding the reason out for it. He made a great video on it, and apparently you could actually get around it by turning off your automatic date and time selection on your PC, just rolling back your PC's clock to January 3rd.
You had to use the same method your fucking mom uses to cheat on those Candy Crush type games where you want an extra life. So they set their phone back a day so they can play it again. And you're like, you're ruining your own phone doing that. You don't even know at the right time. Because that's actually the way around it. It's true. You just set the date like 2 days back.
Yes, it expired on January 4th, and until they have now fixed it. But
also,
you had to roll
I
back
appreciate, I know what you mean. Even though the joke is, you could just put 20 years on this one, boys, you'll be okay. The reason why I appreciate putting 200 years is because I just love where people do shit over the top. Like, do you remember back in the day, the classic one where Aptor got banned?
Yes.
And he got banned for 1,000 years. It's like, bro, what is this fucking H.G. Wells' The Time Machine? No one's going to be playing in 1,000 years. Like, it's the idea. Because what I love about that Nymaera is it's so petty. It's the idea if he lived 200 years, you're like, can I play? Nope. Like,
no. Well, it says here on your file.
Years, I know, like,
wasn't that a thing? God, there was a show like that. Was it Altered Carbon or something like that, where they like made people effectively immortal just so they could serve out extra sentences?
Yeah, that's the point. Yes.
Yeah, gosh.
So I never like thousands of years. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was cool concept. It was like a cyberpunk idea.
Yeah, I watched the first couple of episodes, and the aesthetics were actually really cool.
It wasn't
bad. But then I never kept on with it. But yeah,
it wasn't that great. It was just okay.
Yeah, but you can tell it's been a slow news week, folks. Where we're going down to oops, you couldn't log in because someone didn't oopsie. It's very funny. And this is one of those times where it's not malicious. It's just
of course not.
Some of the I saw some quotes on it, some comments on it, where people are saying like most big companies just slap on something like that and they just forget about the reminders. Very few companies have.
As I say, the odds are the person who even did that certificate 10 years ago doesn't even work with them anymore. It wasn't really some guy who fucked up. He's long gone. Like in fact, the problem, like this is why I made the joke about the spaghetti code. The real problem you have with a lot of these issues is whoever's fixing the problem now might have only just joined 2 years ago. He doesn't even have the well.
Imagine being the poor intern.
Yeah.
Imagine being the poor intern who is in at work that day.
Of course.
Like, gosh. I mean, I know that, for instance, like WoW keeps some people around who have been around for forever. And it's like, if something goes wrong, there is like one person they call.
By the way, the timing on this sucks too. Like, I saw there was all memes on like my circle of people I follow, because I follow a lot of tech people, where supposedly the joke is there's like all memes where they're all like praying to the server when they go home for Christmas, because you don't want to get called
in. The machine spirit, like, praise be the Omnicia.
Because the problem is, you're worried that like on the 26th, you're going to get that call like, hey, you got to get down here. There's a problem with the server file. Like, oh, bloody hell, I'm turning my time off. So the idea this happens on like whatever, January the 2nd or something, it's a bit absurd, isn't it? I know. Like this guy told me he just got back to work. He's walking, it's just on fire. His boss is just like, we've just lost $7 billion doing an all by the skin for the last 4 hours. Like, exactly.
Service 3 and 4 are not responding. Alert, get to your stations.
It's like, I tried to divert the TFT servers to the login process, like done some fucking Star Trek shit.
All power to engines, yeah. Because the thing is that you go back about, well, not even that long ago, and if you're playing on Europe, you just assume that just the Europe server's gone down. Yeah, the funniest thing is that for once, it's everything. I can't remember many, if any, times League as a whole has gone down besides patching. That's kind of crazy, actually. Yeah. So I don't know. It's something which is funny to have lived through. We'll put it that way.
So when I looked up to check that it was 100 years for the Abdul thing, it even said it in the headline. It was like, Abdul banned till 3013. Like, why even write that? Why even write that percentage? And by the way, at that point, can't we just say he's banned for life? Do we really have to say it?
I don't know.
Because like I was saying, they're almost making like if he did get life extension technology, that like in 1,000 years, they'd be like, well, you know what? Fair enough. You get unbanned. You serve your time.
A cynical part of me is like, well, doesn't this open the record, like the door to like some kind of record setting? Like, what is the highest possible? I mean, at that point, you're really going out to bat for that one. But that would be kind of funny. Just think, what is the longest possible expulsion from the league you could possibly get?
And that low key just makes me actually want to make an anime where it's like the year is 3013. Abdul's like psychic was downloaded into a AI 12 years ago. He's still alive and he's finally ready to be released from LOL prison. Well, and he like applies to join LCK or something like plays for Nongshim, of course.
Literally 3 days ago, again, I just watched this on a whim and like again going back to that topic of like trying to find ways to actively relax. I thought I'd find a new anime to watch, and there's an anime which released a couple of days ago, which was actually pretty legit. One of the best episodes ones I've seen in a while, which is called Sentenced to Heroing, where someone is effectively sentenced to be reincarnated to fight the force of darkness time and time again. And if they die, they just bring you back and you're going back into it. Like, it is that same kind of, how much can we keep someone going in this godforsaken fight? You're going to have people already do that in the space of very short amount of time for League, where it just reels them back in. It was the old joke on not the old joke. Well, yeah, I suppose it is. But on the League of Legends subreddit, where someone makes a post saying, I'm finally quitting League after 5 years of playing. And the top comment will always be, see you in 2 weeks. You are just right back into it.
Of course. Right, okay. Speaking of starting the new year fresh, getting certified, obviously the new year is the perfect time to set your goals and do new things in the upcoming year, isn't it? 2026. So one of the things you could do, I'm sure people have thought about it, is when you see online all these different e-commerce and brands and people doing their own business ideas and being entrepreneur, it all sounds cool, but you're on the outside looking in. You're like, right, how would I even get started? How would I find the people who'd help me with my website? How do you set up a secure e-commerce site where there's nothing dodgy and people are not scared? Well, one of the best ways is you can use one of our sponsors, which is of course Shopify, isn't it? Because actually they've made it super easy. The key thing I think with the modern tech, like you get in Shopify's, is you just have to have the initial idea. Once you've got the initial idea, normally that's just like the baseline. You have to then start, like I say, either get people who have skills or learn skills yourself. The beauty is they've got it all sorted out for you. So when you have Shopify, you have everything you need to sell online and in person. Millions of people have already done this through exactly their service, including household brands at this point in time. They have all the tools you could need to easily make a really good looking store. They have hundreds of templates, all sorts that you can customize depending on what brand you want and what you want the overall lookout and the aesthetic to be. They've got AI tools built in, which will just do things like generate the product descriptions, write headlines for you, edit the product photos so they all look legit and how you want them to look in that classic style of online commerce. They got email and social campaigns that are built in so you can reach your customers wherever they end up scrolling on your site. And as you grow, they will scale with you. They can handle more and more orders. They can expand to new markets, and you can do it all from one dashboard. So it's really easy to get used to. So in 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/summoning. Go to shopify.com/summoning. That's shopify.com/summoning. Hey, your first cha-ching this year with Shopify by your side. I can also say as well, as someone who actually did, funny thing, one of the ways I actually got into esports 24 years ago was I knew the basics of how to make a website in HTML. So I just made a website. Then I was making like an esports one. I did some interviews, and that's actually how I parlayed into my job. I have to say, but back then it was way harder and it was way more like the amount of effort you had to put in to do a very basic website was absurd. So if you ever see these sites now, they are so more advanced than even 10 years ago. Like within something mad like half an hour, you'll have like a very legit looking website that like can be functional and someone could essentially immediately buy your product. And all that other stuff like the SEO and that's all other shit that takes ages to learn as well. So even though in theory you might think the skill stack to start is very low, on your own it's still going to be such an arse on. So actually I think stuff like this, if you want to get the first step on the road, it's going to take care of so many of the simple things for you. I mean, like I say, it's going to be in a style that you're going to recognize anyway, what normal business websites should look like. So people don't have to worry that like they're 20 plus years ago putting a dodgy credit card in a website. Like they're going to know it's all the proper e-commerce platforms with all the things they recognize. And so actually, I think it's an excellent way. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to start up a side hustle, this is the best way to get going.
Well, when I briefly did a game dev degree, and actually I dropped out of that to become a caster. But one of the things I had to do on there is make a portfolio website, and that's really useful for that too. Just getting something out of your head and onto something like that, especially if you're not someone with a background in coding. And yes, I've done bits of HTML and CSS or whatever, but it's really important to just be able to get something out there really just easily, and that's a really important skill to have. And I think what you'll find is that you can make a website for a lot more things than you think, and it can be very useful in a lot more ways than you think. So yeah, it's a helpful little tool.
Right. The question now is, what should we hit now? I'm trying to think. What's a legit angle?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a... Well, I mean, that we had the funny thing of the client going down. Demacia are the only real games that we've had. We talked about the meta of League last time around. I'll tell you what, there was one thing. I'll give you this one. I didn't put this in the chat, but there's one interesting thing. I saw Molecule tweet something out, which was, I think on the tournament realms, you know how there are the role quests coming into next season?
Okay.
They are locked to player account, apparently, on Tournament Realm. So you can't even do weird shenanigans like, oh, Caps wants to go bot lane this game to do something different.
Right.
Your account will have, if you're Caps, the mid lane role quest. So you can't do, that creative thing. And this got me thinking about...
Because if people don't know, these are enabled in the game, just as like the Kazakh shit.
Of course they are.
Back in the day. Yeah, it's all part of the official game when you play it.
Yeah. And basically what this means is that you are going to get... Well, I mean, even as soon as... When was the last time we saw, like, role swaps? Well, 2018, 2019, right? When we had people like Faker playing Darius bot lane in, like, the 0 ADC meta. Or... there's plenty of people who think they can play certain matchups better than their other solo laners and stuff. For instance, Xpeke and Soaz, famously back on the 2013, 2014 Fnatic lineups, they would switch roles because they knew a matchup better in top lane than mid lane. And, you just sometimes have to wait until someone has switched into game to do something like that. And it just got me thinking that there have been multiple times where Riot have come down quite heavy-handed onto certain innovations which are happening in the game. I think some of them were fine. I think some of them, I'm a little sad that it has denied some creativity. For instance, I don't miss mid-jungle funneling when it was too prevalent. When you had like Xayah Braum mid lane, or Lulu Master Yi, or Yuumi with stuff like that too, where you had, support, basically double support. You'd have mid-jungle having a support option, then bot lane also having that too. That got a bit too far. Some types of lane swaps were also pretty toxic for the game too. But I think the recent one where you change top lane and bot lane, I thought that was actually pretty good because it changes the way that you draft. It allows you to play a whole bunch of different champions because you're not playing for an AD carry playing into 2v2. I mean, you can't really play Kai'Sa, say, for instance, into Caitlyn Karma. You just die. You cannot play that champion. Being able to swap level 1 with a top lane down to bot lane, and vice versa and whatever, can really change the way that you do things there. And I get this isn't the biggest thing. And would we realistically seen many players actually role swap to make use of something? Well, maybe not. But what happens if Cassiopeia turns out to be really, really good in bot lane with the changes? Well, AD carry, we found this out, folks, in 2018 to 2019. AD carries can't fucking play Cassiopeia, folks. Unless you have a player called Viper. I mean, folks, we all watched Doublelift play Vladimir, and he'll be the first one to say it, right? That just wasn't something which he was great at. Reckless also famously benched himself because he wasn't good at playing that meta of things.
That's why, by the way, the dirty secret that no one ever has to address because he never went bot again is, could actually Perks have just played his whole career as ADC? Because he definitely got away with a lot like Yasuo picks and fucking Syndra and shit. He definitely flexed it whenever it was available. So if it had been a normal year with just the 3 classic picks, would he have been we'll never know, will we? We'll never know.
Yeah. But I think if this is true, and we'll see if this actually is confirmed, but this is taken off of a Molecule saying that effectively your account or like the team accounts will have like the role locked to them. This feels a bit heavy-handed. And in general, over the last couple of years, Riot have tried to make really quite bold, sweeping decisions about how to change the game. Fearless Draft came in. That's outside of game systems to try and promote diversity. The lane swap stuff which happened, and then the lane swap detection, and then the iteration of that to make it even harder to lane swap, that came in. We've had, well, and a couple of years ago, we had stuff like counter jungling being harder as well, because it's harder to kill out enemy jungle camps because they didn't like the way that vertical jungling was happening, where you start in the enemy jungle and you trade like that. This happens enough times, and I feel like you kill off a lot of what would have otherwise been niche creativity, which didn't have to take over the meta, but instead could have been held for that important game. Now, I enjoyed seeing the very occasional funnel where someone does something dynamic and says, yeah, we're pulling out this strategy now, or the very occasional lane swap where only the... I mean, I remember someone trying to lane swap on Odoamne, and he was like, look, I understand this. I have the knowledge to turn this game, because they tried to do it against him, and that was a specifically interesting thing. And I do worry that some of that niche creativity gets stomped out of the game, because I like seeing that cerebral play. I don't want to see it all gone. It's a problem. Yeah, sure, dial it back if it gets too much, like I said, with the funneling or whatever. But if it's only one game and every so often, surely you can just turn the levers back a little bit and still allow it to exist in a short amount.
Especially you'd hope if it's going to be in competitive, like you say, if someone wants to do something in an LEC game, just let them have it for that one game where it's as if they had the bot lane role or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Just have an automatic one that just does it. By the way, I actually figured out something. There's some LCK stuff we can talk about. So first thing, one thing we actually forgot to talk about a couple of weeks ago when we did the episode before Christmas, this was already announced, but it'll lead into the LCK stuff, is the rename of DN Freecs. So what happened is, Freeca TV is now rebranded itself to Soup. Instead of it being DN Freecs, which is what it was called before, obviously hailing back to when it was a Freeca Freecs way back in the day, it's now called the DN SOOPers.
Spelt with a double O.
which, by the way, the joke is, Wolf himself even said that was like the name he joked that they would rename it to, but like hoped they wouldn't, and then they really did. So what do you just think of this? Like, I will say, Freecs itself, it's a long time since they were a top team, obviously, but even so, like, it was one of the names that people probably are familiar with. What do you think of renaming it to Soopers?
I mean, I prefer it to Shifters in some ways, because at least it's a little weird. I mean, let's be honest, when they renamed to a Freeca Freecs, I was sat there going, what the fresh new hell is this? But I was when we talked about the Shifters rebrand, it reminded me actually, because
they automatically win the rebrand battle by not being associated with the Epstein files. So you're like, far, if you're DN Soopers, you're killing it. Just don't tweet and you automatically win this one.
Because again, it's just I miss teams having like funky little guys as logos, like that. Like, remember
the LGL was classic for that, of course.
Yeah, and logos. I remember when I started back in LGL, you had like Sengoku, which was like a full-on like samurai mask, and it was really detailed. I'm like, look, you're probably not going to be easily able to slap that on like a 2-polygon.
Well, I'll tell you the funniest one ever. In European Counter-Strike, there was a team that typically was represented by CIS Russian and Ukrainian players. It was called Hellraisers, right? So understandably, they played into the the theme of like hell and the devil and stuff. But here's an example now, of where I think you can take your theme too far and not consider like the implications. So there was once in like 2016, I want to say, or 2015, they re-signed a player and they had the graphics as him signing a contract with the devil in blood. Even though I get it, they just meant it as a meme now. But I remember being like, bro, if this deal goes badly, that looks so bad. Though. Like, sign your soul the way. Like again, you've leaned in the theme too much on that one.
I don't know. I would totally buy into that. I think that'd be great. No, you can literally be as asshole and org as you want, and you can play it into that. Like, imagine if
we always used to say the worst thing about the EG rebrand is if you're going to call yourself Evil Geniuses and then be evil, lean into it. Yeah, be like TSM, but they were trying to be like PG friendly Disney while being called Evil Geniuses. I know what you mean.
Yeah. No, but I do miss teams being, because it feels like well, you can see this with big tech companies too. Google changed their logo, Facebook changed their logo, obviously the whole Twitter thing to X as well. I'm just like, why is everything just going to this really simple well, I understand why people are going to easy 2D graphics, because it's very easy to copy and paste elsewhere. I'm just I think that for a lot of teams, I'm just a little sad that they are afraid to be characterful and a little bit detailed. And, maybe you can use a simple logo in a better way, but I very rarely see teams do that. So yeah, DM Soopers, at least they have a little bit of weirdness to them. I'm happy to be like, oh, that's a weird name. You can absolutely take it too far. The Hellraisers one, I actually think they could just completely lean into that. I find that very funny, actually. But there are some ones like, do you remember that European team, Mysterious Monkeys, spelt with double E? that just looked like a failed Guerrillas concept art, and not in a good way, because that doesn't stand out. That there are some ones which should not have survived past like the Xbox Live clan tag kind of thing. But at least with Supers, again, the small bonus is you can actually make a joke about it, and it's not crazy. There's one other team that's rebranded as well, and this one actually I think we've got a little bit more meat on, because Breon have lost OK Savings Bank as a sponsor, but they have gained Hanjin, who are owned by, I believe, their parent company also owns Korean Air. So by purpose of sponsorship lineage, we pretty much have Jin Air Green Wings back. Thanks. This is pretty much back, which I'm personally stoked about, because Jin Air with a little glad plane, mad plane, stuff like that, that's one of those things where you took
LCK culture, yeah, of course. And I'll even tell you a detail. I believe because famously Korean Air, obviously, like that flash intro people remember from Brood War, they obviously were around like a long time ago in Korean eSport. I believe that the whole reason they even made that project was one of those stories that's essentially the dream, where I think it was like, the daughter of the CEO or something cared about esports and was like, hey, like, let's make a team or something. So any team like that, I want people like that involved if you want to be back, Well, it's not a cynical cash in. You're doing it for a legit reason.
And in fact, that whole story is covered in a documentary that GBA99 put out, and it's like a proper like hour-plus long documentary going over the history of it, where it effectively is a passion project, and that's why I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why it bought into the StarCraft entrances, with like coming in on the 737s or whatever into the hangars for some of like the most iconic esport entrances ever. Now, I don't know exactly what Hanjin are actually going to bring to Breon. I mean, Breon are a team which has got a fair amount of kind of like cult following, because they were one of these plucky teams that would randomly take games off of people, much in the way that Jin Air did.
I'll tell you what, though, that's one area, though, that even they themselves haven't leaned into enough, bro. Like, they actually should. Essentially, what you're saying is, like, they're like a mixture of a meme team, because the joke is they're so bad they're good, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But also, they actually were sort of like good in a way that didn't make sense. Like, they would inexplicably just beat like a top team in a way that like normally bottom teams never do in Korea. So like that, if anything, they became like everyone's like joke team that they pretended to support. Like, I don't know if anyone was actually a true fan, but there was a lot of people sort of did follow them for novelty value, though, for sure. They had a pretty sweet. The best contrast is someone like SOOPers and Freecs. Like, they were just bad, mate. They were just them and DRX at the end were just legitimately bad.
Yes.
Breon had like that meme quality of like, maybe they fuck around and win though for no reason. Like, they would.
Yeah, they never had.
The name was perfect. The fucking alias was OK Bro. It's like,
okay, in fairness,
for me.
In fairness, that was quite funny, and there is a bit of a loss there. But at least with the Hanjin kind of Jin Air thing coming back, I have hope that we bring back that lineage, and this taps immediately back into something that you were talking about earlier, which is, why don't teams just lean on older lineages, just revive something?
Oh.
God, I mean, it's been a thing time immemorial where people will revive some kind of branding, or, I mean, famously used to be a military regiment thing, wasn't it? Where people would revive like the standard and the tradition of XYZ kind of unit or whatever. Obviously, that's completely tangential, but leaning on past imagery is a lot easier if you can actually utilize it and you actually buy into their vision of things or whatever, than just building something yourself, especially in the current climate. So that one, I'm actually much more positive on. The Hanjin one, I'm like, okay, I can see the logic there. DN Supers, I mean, whatever, losing the Freecs branding, I thought it would. Weirdly, it's a very similar thing where when a Freak of Freecs came in, I thought, oh, bloody hell, this is going to be strange as heck. And they kept that for a while, and then they made that into a much more positive thing. The Supers thing feels like a very similar thing. They just have to stick to their guns and make something more notable out of it.
There is actually a bigger detail, though, about LCK that we can get into here, which is in LCK, they've done the draw for the two groups, right? And here is the area where we can get a rant off Nymaera. Because unfortunately, they've done the same thing as last year, which was a big bomber. So remember last year, the famous detail, if you were a T1 fan, is, but we topped our group, but we had one match against the eventual champions, and we never got into the double Olymp portion, because they've done the same stupid thing with the groups. So the way the groups work is you have two separate groups, but then each of you does cross-group play for a game each against each opponent, and at the end, the groups get determined. The whole group, this is what happened last time, because like D+ is too good in the last one, the whole group becomes the winners group, and then essentially it makes the other group, the one that isn't the winners group, which ended up being T1s last year, they have a more limited route to getting getting to the playoffs, so they have to play like extra matches in a plane, etc. So essentially, it's why last year, famously, even though they didn't play each other directly and win a game, Nongshim got to be top 4 automatically, whereas T1 lost to Hanwha Life at 3-2, and everyone got to laugh at them like, haha, you're 5th to 6th. But in reality, for all we know, they were the second or third best team, but they actually were really good. So sadly, it looks like they've kept, if you look at the Gamepedia, it looks like they've kept the same format, which feels like an obvious flaw, because as I say, the downside of that is you're almost doing like collective punishment, whereas actually maybe one team in that group, like T1, is actually really good. So I'm not a fan of that, I've got to say. I don't know why they kept that even.
And from what I can see, T1 and Genji are in the same groups, so we don't get to see T1 Genji in that group stage. And there's a chance that we go a whole split without seeing probably the best matchup in League of Legends like recent history. I mean, yeah, they'll play against KT and HLE, and there'll be some fun matchups there. I'm not saying we're going to be bereft of good matchups. It is the LCK. But yeah, I the thing which I'm also worried about too is it seems like LCK has somewhat designated Winter Split as the experiment split where they can do weird stuff. But what that means is that last year in 25, the LCK Cup didn't count towards any sorts of stats.
Yep.
And that just felt really weird because you have this disconnect where if you as the league act like you don't care about stats and it's more like, oh, we're experimenting and this means less, then that means that the fans and the players and the teams may be dragged into thinking, oh, it means less. Now, that probably won't be the case. But then the problem is if the players, fans, and teams all act as though it means an awful lot, then it just makes it look like the league is just very disconnected from the vibes of the players and the teams. And it's absolutely a luxury, by the way, for things which are quote unquote meaningless or mean less, not meaningless, but like mean less, for people to care about those things. You absolutely want that kind of engagement. So at that point, I'm just like, well, why would the league downgrade this split somewhat? I mean, I suppose you can take the angle of, oh, well, player welfare we were talking about in terms of, LPL players maybe not playing in split 1 or taking it easy or whatever. But I just don't think this is a great way to broadcast your league and saying, oh, well, we're experimenting potentially, we're doing different formats and doing stuff like this, because these are still very important games between high-level teams, the best teams in the world, realistically, over the last few years. LCK has been number 1 dominant region. And yes, it feels like there's a disconnect between what the league is putting out in terms of formats and how the teams are responding to it.
Also forgive it if the difference was the other problem last year with the format was they had that road to MSI wasn't a proper split. It was just like a gauntlet style where the first winner, so famously Genji won the 3-2 game against Hanwha, and then it was Hanwha for second place against T1. There was never a match between T1.
Yeah, there was no finals, which was a bit
strange. My problem is,
yeah,
if you'd have had a normal final, then I could have gone with what you're saying of like, right, we've already got the 2 splits, and then, this cup thing, look, you guys, we won't make that totally count, so also you don't have to have your roster ready, and all. You could do it that way. My problem is, when you take away the spring finals, as it were, I need the LCK Cup, because I need there to be 2 tournaments. Like, I even thought last year, there's 2 angles. One is, you won essentially the hardest split in the history of Korean League of Legends if you're Chovy. But what if you'd have dominated the whole thing right until the final, then lost? You got nothing for the whole year. Like, that just feels wild. Like, that's not esports to me. That's more like football or something like that, where you'll just be forgotten if you were the team that was leading in the Premier League, then you lose it in the last 4 weeks or whatever. But then also, you're taking away, here's another problem. Every fan, like LEC proved this, bro. You know when LEC had 4 championships to give away each year?
Yes, exactly.
We all said we weren't going to count them as equal, but then everyone did. Everyone was like, capture 15, some absurd title. And obviously the joke is he doubled like perks him out in like 2 years or something insane, right? The problem is, similarly, if we're going to do this, Faker has 10 and Chovy had 5 at the time, then there has to be at least 2 per year for Chovy to win. Otherwise, what are we counting? If at the end it's 9 to Chovy, but you had to win like 5 more whole years. Like, we're comparing apples and oranges, whereas even though I get the sport changes, I want like the accomplishments to be similar.
Yes.
I want an LCK championship to be similar, like there's 2 per year. That's fair. I feel like that's a good system. So that's why I'm a bit off on, like you say, the idea that this is like, it counts, but it also doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like, that feels
Every region's doing something similar. So LPL, basically, you don't get the Silver Dragon Cup, which is like the LPL trophy, unless you win the end of year split. You don't win it unless you win split 3.
Even Whitebit did that thing of like, you're not really the champion
you're not
until you win at the end or whatever, Yeah.
Exactly. And that just felt kind of shit, because actually split 2 particularly actually was very hard for. It was banger. I really liked it. I really enjoyed seeing ALTS kind of take split 1, split 2, and that felt notable. But now you look back in terms of the silverware, and there will be people that discredit that and say, but it's not split 3, it doesn't count. LEC, as you said, they had this whole issue with too many splits, too many finals, because they were, marketing things as upper bracket finals, lower bracket finals, which technically they are within the format. But when you hear that 5 times a year, and then you have season finals, very hard to
season finals actually might be one of the weirdest sort of missteps I've ever seen, because in theory a season final would be the most important, and even though certainly it qualified you to Worlds, because it was right after the other playoffs, it actually just undercut the whole concept.
And then LTA, I actually think I think LTA probably had a better version, potentially a better version, because you have this conference thing, and obviously it ended up being a South versus North team at the end of it. That actually ended up working pretty well for them, but I suppose in some ways, right? But on the whole, every region is struggling to deal with how do you do not a 2-split system, but then also make things matter, but also then not oversaturate. It's a really hard needle to thread for that. And basically what it leads back to is, League is trying to have its cake and eat it in terms of almost having an open circuit, but kind of wanting to have its long-running league, which is really difficult, especially when this LoLEsports is another thing. Like, the audience is very split now, because people watch their favorite content creators, normally co-streamers, right? Which means that they don't have to kind of be as locked in on the main broadcast. So if the co-streamers aren't part of that central messaging in terms of the branding from XYZ and the formats, which they're not obligated to be, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to win over the co-streamers, and if you can't do that, well, fucking fail, haven't you? So I think that every league in the world is trying to figure out how to work with a multiple split system, and it's really, really hard to thread that needle. I personally don't have a great answer for it, besides, well, if you want to have a bloody open circuit, just have an open circuit.
Yeah, the obvious answer to me is have an open circuit. Like, I'll give you
or at least for a part of the year.
If you want the tournament to be totally distinct and not count in the season, don't make it look like the season. Like, I'll give you an example. I would really do is, if you want, like, instead of the Kesper, because the problem is the other thing about the Kesper Cup, it lasts quite a long time. It's quite a lot of games and weeks, etc. I would just do it like an old school LAN. Have a 1-week LAN where the finals takes place in an arena, and it has a totally different feel to whatever this be. If you want, it can be international, it can be domestic, whatever, but just make it so that it doesn't in any way resemble the LCK season. Like I say, because you've taken out what would be the spring finals, LCK Cup feels like that's supposed to be the replacement for that, but it isn't.
And yeah, with that in mind, how can you make it feel different? Well, one, you do different teams, right? If you have like some weird set of teams you want to invite, because the problem is that you always want to invite the top teams. Is there a way to maybe invite some other teams which have some other connections or whatever? Or you fuck around with the format. Suppose this is actually another thing. I did want to talk about this, actually. I have some holdbacks about Fearless Drafts, but I understand some of the benefits from it. One of my negative things about Fearless Draft is that as the series goes on, technically you are reducing the power of the teams, which means that you are seeing, as each game goes on, maybe an increase in variety and ingenuity, but a lowering of the overall level of play. What Demacia Cup did is have Game 5 be blind pick, and I thought initially, from my memories of old blind pick back in OGN, you might have some bangers, but realistically it's going to be a shit show and a bunch of them. I really enjoy blind pick at Demacia Cup, folks. I don't know whether it's just because of a detox from Fearless Draft, but if you basically lower the power level and then you reach the final hurdle and basically everything is available, it is the most powerful League of Legends you can have, because you cannot stop people from playing the very best version of the game that they see. I actually quite liked that, and I would happily watch a tournament which has like blind pick Game 3, Game 5 again. I would happily do that. And if you had like an open circuit where, personally, I think that if you're gonna fuck around with the purity of League, to say, with Fearless Draft, I would rather you just go full into the entertainment value at that point and go for blind pick Game 5, because I have really enjoyed watching that. Screw it. If you're gonna give us Game 5 Worlds Finals with, janky drafts or whatever. Not that it necessarily was for Game 5 in Worlds Finals, but there have been Game 5s, I think, throughout the year which were negatively impacted by Fearless. Up the power level again. Give it a Game 5 where either all picks are unlocked or you have blind picked or something like that. Or if you're not going to do that in your regular circuit, have a one-off tournament like that. That would be a way to distinctively set it aside. What if you did have some like gimmicky tournaments where you're only allowed to play certain stuff?
You will remember this when I say this, but the joke is that was the premise of LCK Cup last year with Fearless.
Yeah, it was. And then they gave it for the whole year. So it wasn't.
So what you're saying made perfect sense, because that would have made it really unique. It would have had this defined quality. Every year, everyone would be like, wow, I can't wait for the LCK Cup part where it's Fearless again. That'll be unique to watch. But the joke is, because they then made that the whole ubiquitous world of League, it undercut exactly what you're talking about, unfortunately.
Because everywhere did Fearless for the first split. And then it was, well, we better keep that one. Well, what is special about your winter split then? And then the problem is, because you're experimenting for a part of a year, which is, a couple of months, by the time it rolls around again, people have forgotten that it was the experimental split, especially since that experiment got carried forwards. And yeah, it means that it doesn't actually stick out. So I get why they're trying to do something different. It just, the messaging doesn't come across. We said this last year as well. But yeah, and I think that if you're going to do something like this, where you're trying to make something in that in-between of does it matter, does it not, you have to do something distinct within the game or the way it's played itself at that point. Like, you can go too far with gimmicks. Like, I think I mentioned this a while ago, actually, on one of the previous episodes, that there was a Vietnamese tournament where you couldn't play a champion again in the entire tournament. That was crazy. And in finals, you had like Quinn ADC, stuff that you'd never see elsewhere. That was too far, because again, you're going to proper loony stuff towards the end of it. But there are maybe some ways that you can experiment with drafts, or, well, I mean, at that point, maybe you do investigate like rotating champion stuff for just a weekend tournament or a week tournament. Say, okay, well, this is going to be, well, it's based on Demacia, have a weekend tournament, only Demacian champions. Maybe that's too restrained, but you can have a think about stuff to do with that. Because I just don't see how, it's definitely not been successful recently, rather, in terms of leagues actually making splits seem distinct enough from each other, I think.
Two things. One, the other reason why I think the LCK Cup thing's so bollocks is because we also just had the Casper Cup. Surely that's the one that doesn't count. What are we doing here? Like
your mum lets you have 2 cups.
Starting now. No, wait. Now, like, fucking hell, we've had 2 whole cups before we even get real play, according to your logic.
Wait, by the way, actually one worse than that. They've got that other kind of like gimmicky tournament too. It's like Team Mid versus Team AD Carry versus Team Jungle. They even have like an extra kind of show match thing too. So you're even just piling up extra show match stuff.
No, because I agree. I thought that was stupid as fuck. That essentially got announced last year, not like be roughly around a year ago, when they were like, Faker just had his 1000th game. Oh wait, that doesn't count. Wait,
not really.
Hold for 2 months. No, he's just had his 1000th game. And the joke is the stats were even the fucking same when he had it. He wouldn't, because on some actual like sacred geometry shit. Somehow when Faker did 1,000 games, guys, he actually won 666 of them and lost like there was some stupid ass thing like that. Where it was like, this is fake. This is actually not real. It's just scripted in it. But whatever. He did win that. And then the other thing to say is, I actually do agree on the blind pick one. Unfortunately, what you're saying is almost the meme that people always remembered of blind pick. They were like, well, it can be good sometimes, but then you get all games where it's like, it's actually just a nothing bug. It's like, that isn't even true. If you ever go back, here's why actually blind pick was an amazing invention. It's just another one of those ones that, because Riot weren't the ones who came up with it, they just got rid of it, unfortunately. And they didn't bother looking at what's the upside of this. I'll tell you what made blind pick really cool, because it was only activated in game 5. So we've already had 4 whole games of trying to do normal League of Legends. What was cool about it was, one of the things me and Monty have always shared as an opinion is, even though soccer is the most popular sport in the world, penalty shootout might be the worst way to decide an undecided contest in the history of sports. It's actually ass. Like, essentially, that component of the game barely features in a real football match. Yeah. But now you're going to decide people's whole like careers, legacies, like the biggest moment of their life on like something that's actually just total ass. Like, you have to realize, guys, the equivalent of that would be something mental. Like, instead of game 5, we just play a smite fight, and the jungler that smites the Baron wins the world champ. That's what football essentially is. So essentially, we already have these problems where the sports have whack ways. So in League, the problem with game 5 always has been this: the map isn't uniform. So automatically, depending on what side I'm on, if there's all these things that make it not a uniform, just here's the 5th game for whoever's in the championship. So I always thought the cool thing about blind pick is this: because, as you say, there's no bans, it essentially is like someone saying that classic question to you. If someone put a gun to your head and you have to just lock in a champion sight unseen and play the game for your life, what would you pick? That's essentially what you find out. Yeah. And what's cool is you will actually get people who will pick something where it's like, look, people probably even know I'm going to play this, but I'm just just like an obvious example would be, I'll tell you an example of some player who'd love this system. Fuckers like Adam, mate, who actually aren't even that sick in the champion pool. He could just pick a Darius into anything, mate. He doesn't. You pick what you want. I'm picking my pick of what I'm super sick on, and I've piloted this champion in 1 million matchups. So you know what? That's where I'm pushing all my chips in the middle. I think that's actually cool, especially because we're talking about, if you notice, we're not saying make worlds like that. We're saying make one split to make it distinct, have this cool component to it that would have its own flair. And yes, it would certainly decide games on it, but in a way that wouldn't ruin the rest of the circuit. I actually think that's a good idea, mate. And I also agree with what you said there. I've said this to Monty years ago, because the main problem League has is we're going to keep, it looks like we're going to do the CS go to CS2 thing, mate. They're just going to make League 2 have all the same champions, and we keep adding new champions. Well, eventually there's just too much. So the obvious angle that you're alluding to here is they've got to take some cues from fucking Magic the Gathering and do sets. You know what I mean, boys? If we're going to have 200 plus champions, we've got to have it where, like, there's only 60 of them in each set or something, you know, and you keep activating it through the year. That's also another way, by the way, to artificially create diversity in the champion pool meta, which is clearly what they want via Fearless.
Yes.
But the problem is, though, you can't have 200 plus champions and have that sandbox for everyone. That's going to be too much, mate.
I personally wouldn't do champion rotation for like the main circuit of League because I think it's too important to have all of it. But just play around with it again. And it's funny you mentioned MTG. I've literally just got back into that game to have finally been dragged back into the cardboard crack. It's Mono Black Sephiroth is coming, folks. It will eventually be there. But yeah, you have to at some point play around with it if you're going to try and be distinct. I think this kind of pussyfooting around the experimental splits is the problem actually with that is that they ended up making it not experimental. They just made it the precursor of the whole year. In some ways, I understand that the reception would have been very bad to keep Fearless just to winter because people were so kind of high on it. Personally, I think the novelty did wear off. I think it wore off. And you know,
one thing we're sort of addressing with this blind pick thing here, the elephant in the room is this, and no one wants to say it, Nymaera, because on paper, everyone loves the idea of Game 5 in any Worlds or MSI, right? The idea of Game 5 is the notion, well, getting through Silver Scrapes, everyone get in here, it's going to be the best. But the problem is, old Game 5s were some of the best games ever. Fearless Game 5s are fucking terrible, mate.
Yes.
Listen, by the best will in the world, like, there are so many of them that are just like, I think the Worlds Final is a perfect example. There are both MSI Final and the Worlds Final had a Game 5 where the losing team just could not execute their comp, bro. They just couldn't. Like, because you got to the point where there's nothing left to pick.
And I do think that, no, it's not all due to Fearless. There's a bunch of other stuff. Yes, there are, some people might say that, oh, you're just scapegoating Fearless. It definitely takes the percentage off. And if you're trying to watch folks, I'm here for the best possible League of Legends. And I find the most entertaining League of Legends the very best play stuff. I want to see those tight play team fights and crazy map plays and very in-depth understanding of matchups. If you take like a % off per game and you end up with 5% off in the final game, that is actually pretty significant, folks. And yeah, for those people who say, but I hate watching blind pick matchups, the most famous play in all of League of Legends history is Zed versus Zed. That is the most famous play. In fact, that's the most famous play in all of esports, I think. That's probably the most played clip in ever. And even if you could argue, if you only have one clip of nearly that caliber per year, isn't blind pick a success at that point? And I can't think of like crazy amounts of plays which happened anywhere in the world to that kind of caliber. And also, I also find occasional mirror matchups very, very interesting because you can't hide from the skill difference there.
Yes.
Now, we were seeing in Demacia Cup, Orianna versus Orianna. Folks, if you lose that matchup, you're not hiding from anything. You just lost. You were the worst player. Sometimes if it's a jungle matchup thing, it's okay, you can hide from whatever, blah, blah, blah. But in the straight lane versus lane matchup, 2v2, what are you winning that with? And there's the mind game too of, oh, they think that's there. Maybe I can blind pick, but there's no way, maybe I can counter pick, but there's no way for me to confirm that. I love that mind game. And then you have, 30 seconds to choose your runes after seeing the full team comp and trying to figure out what mess you can make, what you can save out of that mess too. I find that really interesting. For instance, Demacia Cup, the best jungler was Jace. Jace was the best jungler, crazy good. You can build full glass cannon because you don't have to play against a laner. You don't need to build HP to survive an Aurelia all in like it used to be or whatever. But then the other team realized, oh, well, if they're going to pick Jace, we're going to pick Noxa and Orianna. Nocturne's not the best jungler, but it's very good against Jace. You can't play this. That was a really fun mind game. I really enjoyed watching that. So yeah, I think that upping the power level for that game 5, and if you're leaning into drama and diversity, surely blind pick helps that too. And yeah, maybe you do just trial it as one split. Personally, I wouldn't mind either seeing everything unbanned or blind pick in game 5, but I don't want to see game 5 be the lowest point of power in the series. It should be the best possible game and the most powerful possible turns for League.
There's even another thing. I'll give you another compromise. You basically just hit it at it there. Another compromise is it's not blind, but there's just no bans for game 5.
Yeah.
Let's all just make whatever comp we want. Look, obviously you can take the champion from me. You can do that if you want. It's not blind. They're not double up. But what I think that would even maybe be the antidote to Fearless, mate, because the problem with Fearless, as we're saying, is it just sort of like has a poor scaling quality once you get to the game 5 in particular. Like that one, unfortunately, it just so far just doesn't yield good games. Like, because logically we're just too far in with the bans and the picks. It's too far in.
Yeah, and I know that some people are saying, oh, but Fearless is meant to shine in game 5. Like, realistically, I don't think so. And also, I mean, if you've gone toe-to-toe 4 games and you go to a game 5, I would prefer it again go back to starting point, even if you just reverse all the Fearless bans. There are 3 options. Either, so LDL, the Chinese Development League, did this before. You get to game 5 and it's just a regular draft, so you have normal bans. You do blind pick game 5 like Demacia Cup, or you do like a no ban system. I want to see the power level up. I mean, that's just my whole 3-point for this. I don't want to see game 5 be the weakest you see these possible teams. Yes. I just think that is antithetical to the level of hype. You want the stakes to be highest with the knives being sharpest. Personally.
That's also why, in my opinion, it would also be awesome if you had one of these options we presented. Because I also think that, like, here's the difference. I actually think if you went back in time 10 years ago and had Fearless, it would work. Because back then it was a lot more about individual player strength and just getting the pick you want. Like, as I've pointed out many times over the last couple of years, I've had to learn the hard way myself, because I tend to be more someone who's like, I specialize in like player performance and following great players and seeing how their ups and downs are happening in their career. Well, one of the things I saw in the last couple of years, especially of League, is the actual like onus on having the comp more than strong picks has been huge the last few years. It's actually also why I think sadly Fearless has been a bit asked, because as I say, people end up drafting towards specific types of comps, and then in game 5 you're never going to get like 2 of the picks you need, so you can have some super scoffed version of the comp, and if at the end you really can't execute the win conditions of the comp, the game itself is going to be a lot less interesting anyway, because this isn't the old League where you just play the game out, you win the lane, you have one guy carry the game. It's like that's an antiquated way of playing a league that sadly hasn't existed for many years. The spoiler, the LPL teams of all teams know this. I mean, you could actually argue, hasn't T1 just won all these worlds by figuring out the comps? It's essentially been their best strength as a team, is figuring out the patch.
That's definitely, I mean, particularly Worlds 23, you have to say that. When they flipped it into the double range bot lane midway through the tournament, changed everything. Occasionally teams have done that, 2016, Rocks nearly did that with the Misfortune support, figuring out certain things about the bot lane meta. Obviously, things change a lot between play-ins and main stage of a lot of worlds. Remember that year we had Echo Jungle, didn't work, and then people found out other stuff later, and it was actually Talon Jungle was the broken one in, was it Worlds 21? I think it was Worlds 21, something like that. Yeah, I mean, figuring out stuff like that halfway through the tournament is a skill in itself. And I like seeing the cerebral part of League have its place. It has gone too far. It has gotten to the point where actually there are too many ways to save you from a bad early lane, because everyone has sustain. No one has to worry about mana costs because they're way more forgiving with mana flow banned and first back lost chapter than they were. I mean, folks, if you didn't play in Season 4 or Season 3, I mean, certain matchups were, I can clear a wave in half the mana. So Syndra versus Ahri, Season 3, Season 4. Syndra would clear a wave in half the mana that Ahri did in Season 3, Season 4. And that would make you win the matchup in certain cases. Unless you were very good at mana consumption on the other side of Ahri and actually always get a 2-part Q on the enemy opponent so you got the right chunk. That kind of micro skill set, I get that it's kind of boring, and actually it is quite hard to get a casual player to get engaged with that, because it's just not as sexy as big solo kills, whatever. But that would actually lead to that, because, not everyone had teleport. People were running heal and ignite, which gave them more combat power, or especially ignite before the heal meta of the heal ghost meta of Season 4. And yeah, I think that nowadays there are too many things which save you from a bad early game, partly because Riot, I think, have been really reluctant to add in systems or continue systems which punish you for one early laning mistake. I think particularly top lane was like this. One of your favorite players, Flame, obviously one of the biggest beneficiaries of all of that stuff. You give him one good lane state, game's over. He's got 100 CS lead. You gank him once, he will then just run off with it. And there was something very beautiful about that, where someone could just run over a matchup early and then just win a game off of it. I do understand needing the balance to say you can't just lock someone out of having a game from one early mistake. There is a balance to be struck there. We've gone way too far the other way, though, where there are too many things to save you from a bad early game.
Yes. I mean, especially because on top of it as well, ignoring just the laners, jungle itself got nerfed a million years ago. Like, There was all those, again, because the same problem, eventually it got to that the absolute best jungler in the world really could be like a bazillion miles ahead of the third best jungler in the world. Unfortunately, Riot, I always feel like the one aspect I think is negative when they look at pro play is they tend to look at bloody outliers. Like the joke is people like Faker have gotten champions nerfed and banned, even though it's like, well, the rest of us are playing the fucking game. We're not Faker.
That is legitimately the biggest thing for Faker's legacy is Faker was actually target nerfed as a person and the way that he played multiple times. Everything he did in terms of laning tricks in Season 3 and Season 4 got the game changed. He was so good at the game, he was directly nerfed. Now, there is something to be said about that. It's somewhat natural if a team dominates a year, people try and copy that team, the whole pro meta follows that, and then the developers have to say, okay, we need to start nerfing the dominant form of play so other styles of play can, or at least they attempt to bring it in line so other styles of play can be played. That's natural. But when one player does it, you think, oh, bloody hell, this person's so good at it. Then you realize, actually, should you be nerfing someone who's such an outlier, as you say? Or actually, should you look at the whole cohort and say, get better? This person's very good. What do you want me to do about that?
No, by the way, what's bizarre is I actually am aware of one other sport that's had the same problem. Believe it or not, in basketball, there have been 2 or 3 times where they've changed the rules for people like Wilt Chamberlain back in the day or Charles Barkley. Just people who had bizarre areas. They were just too good at one thing. Like, I'll give you the weirdest one ever because a lot of people don't know this. It's actually the Charles Barkley one. Believe it or not, Charles Barkley, who for his position, power forward, is undersized. In real life, he's about 6'4". But that position, you're supposed to usually be about 6'6" to 6'9" or so. It's actually one of the bigger positions. He just had too strong a low center of gravity, and he could basically, when he would back you down like this, he keeps the ball. He would just do it forever, and he would just keep going until he got to the basket. And so because he could do it every single time, they actually made a rule that you're not allowed to back down like that for more than 3 seconds. So the joke is everyone else who couldn't even do this, by the way, just got punished.
Oh, come on.
And in his case, like you're saying here, the wackest thing is it's like, but he's just really good at that. Like, what? Like, to me, that's
shouldn't you be celebrating people being really good at that? Wasn't it Shaq as well? He was so physically overpowering people that they had to change some rules for him.
Sure.
Yeah. There are occasionally people who like, obviously in traditional sports, you have people who are like physical outliers to the point where they do just break a game. And again, there are arguments about, well, that's just the way they are. They have a physical advantage. Isn't the whole point of traditional sports to figure out who is the best at this? Their physicality is part of that. I mean,
by the way, the most extreme one I still think in League is the fucking jungle changes, mate. Essentially, because if you have to realize this is the era, guys, when Monty was starting to do mainly Overwatch. He wasn't watching League as much. And I remember when I would talk to him, he was like, look, on the one hand, I want to say congrats to the LPL for winning all those worlds, but they did win it after basically jungle just got removed. Like,
the vision control and stuff too.
Korean style jungler was just too godlike with that tracker's knife, mate. Essentially, they were never going to lose in the long run. Like, but the problem is, as you saw when you remove that, the Kanavi type people of the world are going to dominate me. Like they can be all of a sudden the MLXGs of the world are twice as good as they were before. You know what I mean?
No, that's a very good point, actually. I think a lot of people who started watching, 2018 onwards, really, that was the downfall of the Korean era of dominance. But the reason is basically any time you had significant ability to put down wards from jungle and support, the Koreans were just too good at getting perfect information and then making the perfect play off of that. I cannot put into perspective how crushing it was to get an early game lead. The enemy Korean jungler puts down the wards in the right place and the support does at the same time, and they make the perfect play from 10k, even if it was like 10k down. That was always the thing about T1. This was a very different era of play. T1 became the early game aggressive, actually more LPL style team, I suppose, if you think about it in broad overhead terms, in about 22, 23. If you look back to 2015, 2016, 17, or whatever, the thing which was always held over your head, and so many pro players gave so many interviews, was you make one mistake, they find one play, and the game is over. And that was how crushing it was, where you thought you finally had the game. You'd solo killed them. You put them 10k behind. I mean, you look at the one of the more famous ones was the 2017 Worlds one with the Wolf Faker Shockwave combo with the Rakan, where it goes in 10k down, and they just destroy EDG with a 5-man Shockwave, which I would argue is more Wolf's play than Faker, but Faker's Shockwave will find them all is the only thing that people can remember about that play. And it does kind of annoy me. But yeah, you go back to that era because there was Tracker's Knife or Sightstone Jungler or double Sightstone in terms of jungle and support, which is also one of the reasons, by the way, why Lee Sin was so meta at that time, is that he actually used Sightstone as a fighting item because it allowed him to ward hop in the right places. One of the reasons why Lee Sin is less popular now is partly because of the removal of stuff like Sightstone. Yes, use trinkets and whatever. But yeah, in that era, it was very hard to overcome these very precise macro teams of Korean teams. I also understand why they moved away from that style of play, because actually it meant there were less fun, not quite 100% skirmishes. There was too little variety in the way that some games played out. But in terms of the beauty of the macro and the way that you approach the game, you have to just accept sometimes that sometimes teams are really good, and you don't bounce around that. You let them be outliers because they deserve to be outliers because they're that good.
Agreed. And also, the bigger point is, I actually do just think, well, no matter what you might want the ideal to be, the actual thus far, at least this last year, the end result of Game 5 just weren't very good. And I think a lot of the suggestions we're making would almost certainly improve the entertainment value and
at
the
least
competitive parity of a Game 5.
Try him for a split, at least.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, that's also the other thing. That's the precedent I actually fuck with, is the idea that if you're going to say there's a split or a tournament that doesn't count, then use it to experiment. Then it's okay. Yes. Then we're not actually destroying people's careers based on some wacky thing we put in. It doesn't count. Then just let's just see if it works. And then if it's good, we can do like failure and apply it to everything. If it isn't, it can just be a one-off silly thing that either is just once a year or one time only, and then we try something next year. That's cool too. Anyway. That's what brings us to our last sponsor shout out, which is going to be Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Now, what's great about Prize Picks, I've actually played this myself, is they have loads of sports on there. I actually enjoyed playing American football on there, where they would have like a bunch of projected stats for things like, I mean, I'll give you an example. I did a whole bunch of mores on Matthew Stafford, the quarterback of the Rams, where it would be like he'd have this many touchdowns in passing, and I just went basically more on most of them because I actually thought this season he's going to ball out. He's always been an underrated player. They have them all, though, running backs with the rushing yards, every position you can think of. It's really easy to do also. You just pick the lineup. It only takes a few seconds to get it all set, etc. And one of the big benefits, actually, I think, of this service compared to things like fantasy sports is in fantasy sports, if you mess up too badly in the first few weeks, you're just wasting your time pretending like you can still care for the rest of it. On this one, you just re-up your lineup the next week. You pick something different, don't you? Or you pick another angle of what makes sense, which more or less do you want. It's also super easy because you're not dealing with loads of numbers. You're just picking more or less on each of the stats projected ones, and also there's loads of options of the projections. You just pick the ones that make sense to you. They've also got a bunch of features, like they now have one called early payouts. So if your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game is even finished. If you have a thing called Flex Play, if you want flexibility, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter your play, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Also, if you are American, it is available in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, etc. And they have a thing now called stacks. So if you're a big fan of one specific player, you could just stack a bunch of their projections all on top of each other. So in the same way as I might have done Matthew Stafford there, I could do more passing touchdowns, more yards, etc. You could also do, if you're a fan of like Steph Curry in the NBA, you could do 3-pointers, assists, overall points. You can just stack your favorite player if you think they're going to have a big week. And as usual, if you are right, you get paid, don't you? So super easy. Withdrawals are fast and secure. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code summoning to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code summoning to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Okay. Right, as I said, it was a bit of a lighter one this week because there just wasn't actually that much news, and we're waiting for, obviously, next week is when all the LEC begins and the LCK, etc. So we'll do all that in the next episode, don't worry. I figure what we do now is do a little Q&A session.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
sounds great.
So we'll just be like 2 minutes, we'll come back and we'll do the Q&A and wrap the show. Right, final segment of the show is, of course, viewer questions. If you would like to submit a question, technically, if you watch it live now, there's still time, but you'd have to get on with it. What you have to do is subscribe to the Last Free Nation Discord, and then there is a section called like crew members or crewmates or something, and within that, there is each of the channels for the different shows that you can submit questions for. Technically, if you subscribe once, you can submit to any of the shows, but obviously for this one, you're going to submit to the SI questions channel, and I will pick the ones from there that seem interesting / just look like they vibe with the show and they're not stupid. Obviously, if you want us to not mention your alias, just say so, but it seems like no one ever gives a fuck about that, so we'll just do as we do each time. So I will pick the first one. So Danio says, part of the longevity and success of players like Faker and Caps are that they are on the best orgs in the region that continuously surrounds them with the best players. If you could turn back time, what player would you put on a premier organization that might completely change their legacy? So as an example, he says, obviously for me, he says like if Froggen had started in Fnatic, for example, because the premise here, I like the premise, by the way. The premise here is if you are people like Caps and Faker, essentially think of the discussion we just had about Rookie. You've never had to make those decisions. You just sat there and you know, essentially, like the joke is a bad year for Caps and Faker is like, I only had like 3 teammates that could have won. You know what I mean? They almost never have a bad roster. So is there a player you're thinking of where you'd like to recreate their whole career and give them a better spot to start from?
So everyone we mentioned before in like BDD Rookie, they definitely apply to it. There's a player which just jumps to my mind though, Mad Life. Poor Mad Life in space prison for the last years of his career. If he'd had he was still so good right up until 2015, where obviously things kind of. Did he quit in 2015? But that guy's an instant.
He technically played in Challenger after that, but obviously his game.
Right? Yeah. Like that guy, absolutely. And then I suppose any of the best parts of the Samsung teams which didn't find success. So that would have been someone like Dandy, maybe, who just Dandy is one of those case studies of the hardest fall off year to year of career ever. Because he went to China in 2015. Was he on Newbie, actually, or something like that? Or Vici? He was on Vici.
Was the one
and he was bad. He was bad there. And part of that will have been, if they got Dandy to stay in Korea, would have been excellent. Mad Life, if they'd actually given him an actual AD carry for the last years of career, because I'm sorry, Space, he just didn't qualify at that point. That would have been exceptional. That's top of the list. Anyone top of your mind?
I mean, the actual Froggen example is not a bad one. I also will totally acknowledge, I think Froggen himself is someone who made bad career decisions. Like I can tell you, some of those years where he was on some of those NA teams that weren't the good ones, like the Echo Foxes and the Fly Quests, some of those were just because he liked people within the org and the money was good, you know, like silly shit like that. Whereas like, I know what he means. Essentially what I would like with some of these players is we just take it out of their hands. If someone like Froggen had been on a Fnatic or an SK Gaming back then, he wouldn't make any decision. He would just sit there and play mid lane, and then they just stack people around him. Another person I actually think a modern day example of that would be Upset. I think if Upset had himself gotten to a G2 or Fnatic, but like early in his career, this is another person who's made a lot of like questionable choices or gambled on a lot of projects. Because that's the other thing I think's a bummer, to bring it back to the Rookie conversation. It's not the idea that like everyone gets a perfect squad, but when you're at the top level and you're at the level where all you have to do now is win the championship or win worlds, you don't want like a massive X factor of like, is this guy even going to be good in pro player? Like shit like that with rookies is crazy. Whereas if you go and look, I actually think one of the best things about people like Faker's career is beyond when they did the big gamble to get the next set of talents. Generally, all the best players want to join him to win with him.
Yes.
Like, think about how many top laners would queuing up to try and win worlds of Faker. So if you do want to maximize someone's resume, you do need something like this. And some of the people I've picked, they weren't on the right team, unfortunately. And unfortunately, they almost took being the agent / GM into their own hands. And understandably, there's going to be very few people who are good at the game and fucking GMing a squad. Like, those aren't even much of an overlap for skill sets, as far as I can tell.
I think I can maybe pick a player for each region, actually. So I'd put Mad Life for Korea. I think Upset for EU is a really good call. NA, I'm struggling with a little bit, but LPL, I'd actually choose Flandre. Now, obviously, he became a world champion, but his first years of his career were arguably his best individually, and he was on not good teams. When he was on Snake and stuff like this, he was like the one guy trying to be the carry top laner in a region who at the time was playing a lot of bruiser top laners. I think that Flandre, if he'd had a better team in the early years, could have really, really changed things. Because now he's kind of seen as a bit kooky, plays for the team kind of player. He's kind of gone through his Faker arc in some ways, where he was exceptionally good individually, and now he's become a bit more of a team player later on with occasional individual bursts of incredible form. I think Flandre actually could have been very different if he did that. NA, I think most of the players who I'd want to see do well actually did stick on a team for long enough. I guess there's an argument for maybe someone like Sneaky, who I think had more to give in his career, but he did have his career. Like, he had a very good roster for a lot of his career. It's just towards the end, I think that he wasn't prioritized that much. And I think actually he could have had a much stronger career if people had prioritized him more. Can't think as many for NA.
The problem with a lot of the players I think this best applies to are the ones like the Upset. Forgiven would be a good one. I also think another factor is I always have had a theory about some of these players. Actually, this is one of the things that ruined Upset's game. I actually think if you ever saw him play early on, he was never as passive as he is in the modern day. Eventually he got so that like he couldn't trust people because he'd been on too many broken rosters where like the jungler can't play or the fucking mid laner doesn't go in. So it's almost like you have to think of it like relationships where you're bringing baggage from your past failed relationships. Well, eventually the reason why you become essentially a broken person is you're meeting a normal person for a relationship who thinks they're gonna have a normal relationship and they don't realize you have like all this baggage that they were never around for, so they can't address, but that is going to impact your relationship now. So a lot of these people, the reason why the Caps analogy is a good one is no one knows what it would have been like for Caps if he'd have been on Schalke in his first LEC team. He's this up and down player, but what the fuck's this squad? And are you even well coached? And would you become a diva? Would you become the bad attitude because you're the one that's good and everyone's bad? Like, I feel like a lot of people went down like the harsh road like that. I just wish I could reset them and give them all the sort of reckless, you're born with the silver spoon, here's all the best teammates for 10 years, and then let's just see how everyone does, because that's actually, it's one of the reasons why it's only in the latter days that everyone could do this whole, there's no debate between Perks and Caps. Motherfucker, Perks made all of his championship rosters. What are you talking about? Caps just got squads built around him and then played awesome mid lane. Like, those are two different ways to succeed. Like, one is like a captain's route, the other one's being really good at your position. So a part of me wishes every great player got like, just essentially the appropriate level squad for them and then someone to do the GMing for them. Because I do think, sadly, Perks is a great example too. Perks essentially was one of the few players ever who had to GM his own squads to get the right players in, to get back on top, etc. Like,
that's where the pool party came from.
He even did what I still think is the most genius move of all time. He recruited his direct rival so that his rival couldn't have any more championships than him because they just win the championships together. Like, that allowed him to stay on top for like 5 years.
It's the one time where someone said, join me and we'll rule the galaxy together. It's the one time it worked.
But it was dope though. Okay, here's another question. Oh, go on.
There's one other OQ was really good at the start of his career, did nothing afterwards because he ended up leaving whatever team he was on.
He went to NA as well, but I also failed. Sadly, a lot of these players wasted their time going through like Challenger and NA and shit. Whatever. Right, Nadnerb says, let me have a look here. Okay, this is interesting. He says, would you compare Faker's longevity to someone like Tim Duncan in basketball, where it is a sort of fake longevity due to their team strength, right? I'll just give, for people who didn't follow basketball, the analogy there. Yeah, Tim Duncan is thought of as one of the greatest players of all time. He has like 5 championships. He's won the MVP. He was a very good player in both ways in basketball. But the point this guy's making, this is obviously a guy who must be from my like fucking Discord or something, because it's like sort of my take, is that Tim Duncan is slightly overrated for exactly that reason though, which is that his teams, because he was a very good player, you could build around him very easily. His teams basically had like almost Faker level longevity where they could still compete after like 15 plus years playing. But I think a bit like Faker, he wasn't necessarily the best player at the end or the best player in the league. It's more that like he had the best, again, it's another one of those things, you've got the best setup around you where people can be refreshing your squad and bringing the right new players. And also he was in some very well coached squads that you could even draw another comparison there. Like Faker's had Coma for a bunch of these championships, etc. So essentially, we don't have to do the basketball angle there, but I would ask you, what do you think about that on the League of Legends one? Like, is that unfair to do that? Because the problem here is when you say the term longevity, to me, there's 2 types of longevity. One is you just play as a pro. Like, that's impressive in itself to still be relevant and play the game. Like someone like Zhao, who is still relevant. He's not a top player anymore, but he's still a relevant player who can play for many more years. But I think when people say longevity, this is why this guy calls it fake. They mean like as the actual potential best, like if you talk right now about Chovy and Knight's longevity, it's the idea every year they compete for best in the world, like of the whole game. Like that's it. So how would you break this down? Does Faker, cause his teams won, do people exaggerate his individual longevity? What's your perspective on it?
There's a nugget of something in there I agree with, which is I think some people assume that Faker is still the same Faker that played from 2013 to 17, where he was quite clearly best player in the world for the majority of that time. Do I think that Faker has been the best player in the world for the majority of 2018 through to now? No. Do I think this argument then undersells Faker by the fact that he was still winning regionally and internationally since then, and still being one of the best players in his role? Yeah, probably does a little bit. So it's as many things are. There's a bit of nuance to it. Yeah, I think that some people somewhat oversell Faker on an individual level. There is, however, that one split where you had to sub out, the team fell apart without him, he subbed back in, and they ended up going to Worlds and obviously then winning the damn thing. That is insane. That is insanity. And I think that actually adds a lot of credence to it. I think the value which Faker adds now is different and less visible in terms of his mechanics than it was before. Not that he doesn't have those levels spurts of things too. Yeah, I think there is a nugget in there I agree with, which is I don't think he's definitely not, he's not maintained like best in the world from start of the career to the end. There has been a dip ever since like 2018 onwards, really. 2018 was where things started kind of falling off. We started to see, you know, the perfect Faker image start to tarnish a little bit. He's reinvented himself. I still think that you still have to commend his longevity. He's won 3 worlds back to back at this stage in his career. Yes, his team being very good definitely added to that, but I think this world's in particular was better from him individually than any of the other 3, I would say. Although, honestly, 23 was also pretty good too. Obviously, the Faker Azir shuffle mastered the Orianna Azir matchup.
I think it's only because BDD was probably the player of the tournament. He was in the final. Yeah. Made people not realize this was actually an excellent Worlds from Faker. Played great.
Yeah, and I still think that BDD had a better Worlds than Faker. And I mean, I feel like I'm in a very big minority with this, but I think last year, I think Knight had the best Worlds of in 24. I think 24. I think he had the
that's fair.
The best individual tournament there. Even though Faker game 4 and 5 was obviously the better player in the 2 clutch games. But that doesn't mean that Faker wasn't, you know, a monster unleashed in some of these games and in tournaments still. So I don't think it's right to discredit his longevity, because I think the real kicker of this, if Faker doesn't have longevity, who the fuck does? Basically. Like, no one even holds a candle to it, even in terms of overall level of play. As you're saying, someone like Xiaohu, who's been playing since 2015 odd, he's not nearly the same player he was, and his peaks weren't as high, and I don't think his consistency has been as high as well. But yeah, I mean, Faker obviously isn't exactly the same player he was, and I don't think he was. I don't think he's been clearly the best player in the world for the majority of any year since 2017, really.
Yeah, to me, I would just say this. To make it really fair, I'll just frame it this way. Oh, don't worry. If you stick around in League of Legends and this show is running in 3 or 4 years, I will do exactly the same thing I'm doing now to Faker and Xiaohu, to Knight and Trophy. Because almost certainly they will no longer be contending for best player in the world and best mid laner to ever play League of Legends in their peaks in each of the seasons. There'll be at some point players where they'll have to win on intangibles, or they'll be the captain, or they'll do Faker moves where you can be bad for part of the tournament, but then you come alive on the big game 5 or the key fight in game 3 or whatever it is. The real problem with this whole topic is, one, that's why, if you notice, I went out of my way to immediately unpack what do we mean by longevity. Do we just mean being relevant in the scene, or do we mean actually being longevity as the star player and, you know, the position best? Well, similarly, I would also say another detail people are missing here is this happens all the time in every game where you're having GOAT discussions. What happens is this: because you pick whichever your might be, you pick player A and I pick player B and someone else has player C, because all people do every day is talk about, like, yeah, but here's what player A has that player B doesn't, right? It inevitably becomes that if you've picked player A, it sounds like all you're doing is shitting on player B. Sounds like that, because essentially you're trying to attack their argument. But to a fan who's a casual, that just looks like you're just attacking their player and saying their player isn't very good. And all you're doing is pointing out the negatives, because what you're trying to do is contrast. You're trying to say, if I have A and B and I think A is better than B, then to essentially one of the most obvious ways I can make the point to you is to show you how B lacks something that A has. Well, the problem with that approach, unfortunately, is you're taking, by definition, the best players to ever play the game. And it sounds like you're only tunneling on negatives about them. Now, unfortunately, that's because that's a feedback loop. If a Faker fan comes along and they are 19 years old and they didn't watch League before 2020, they're going to see Faker win. He's their favorite player and he has an awesome Worlds run. And they're going to go, wow, he is the best player now. He right now is the best level. And they're going to do all this shit like they did to Dom, like his peak is now and all that nonsense, right? So my problem with that angle is, at this point in time, if you don't tell me the conversation starts with Faker right now is the best player to ever play League, I can give you a 1 hour wax lyrical on Faker's qualities, mate. Like, by the way, he probably has the greatest intangibles of any esports player ever. I'd actually say at this point in time, his true greatness isn't even when he was at his peak in the 2010s. That's like a lot of great players when they're at their peak, they were just the best player. Surely his actual strengths at this point in time are more comparable to people like the Tom Bradys of the world, where even when they're not the best, they're the most clutch. They always come alive in the big moment. They add something extra to teammates that maybe never shows up on a box score or is never captured in a cool anecdote. But I mean, the joke is this last one, most recently, even has what looks like a meme that's actually a massive feather in Faker's cap. as he is winning the world championship, he is like talking Thorin off an interledge to win the game. Like, no other player in League of History is doing shit like that. You know, everyone else is just playing the bloody game. Like, he was like a fucking negotiator / counselor while playing the fucking game and completing it. That's kind of cool. As long as you don't make it that individually he played the best, because the joke there is even BDD played better than him. But if we're only talking about the positives, we can go all day long. So, no, I do think if we want to take away it being the best player, because that was always the distraction, the smokescreen fit. If you want to just say years as a player who was relevant that you could win, no one can match him. But probably not in the history of esports, by the way. Like, I think he probably wins that one too.
And even by any metric you choose, I don't think anyone can match him on the longevity argument. So regardless of what your takeaway is, Faker has the best longevity of any player in League, because no one else even gets close. Even if you think he's worse in many different ways or blah, 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 that will always come back to that core of it. So until there is a major fall off and he's no longer relevant, he's still in that conversation.
That's also why, though, to me, it is interesting that I think the detail people have missed. Because if you notice, what makes the Knight Chovy versus Faker discussions boring is because it always just comes every year down to, well, they haven't won Worlds because, spoiler, Faker's been winning all the Worlds, so there's no way they can win. It makes it sound like the conversation hasn't moved at all. Whereas one thing I do think is very interesting, I said it earlier in this episode, the reason why, for me, Rookie is the best player in the League of Legends history, I didn't say greatest, I said best, is because I can find the most amount of years where he could have been the #1 player in the world. Like, the point is, here's what is interesting. Faker's had his time. It's been and gone. Chovy and Knight are both at this point in time on like a solid like half a decade of what we're talking about. Like, they're getting close to the point where they're going to be in that conversation. Like, that's what people don't realize. I'm not unfair in that sense. Like, Rookie won't be #1 forever. At this point in time, if I had to guess, I think Chovy is going to get there, mate. It looks like he's going to churn out 2 or 3 more years like this. In amongst that, he might not even ever have to be clutch, mate. He'll probably trip over and win Worlds eventually, especially, by the way, when Faker fucks off. Like, at that point in time, by the way, everyone's going to win Worlds. What are we talking about? Like, the joke will be, you do know the day Faker retires, bloody top esports ejaculate will probably win Worlds. Like, that's how stupid it'll get. So eventually he will win them. I'm also interested in that. If we project forward 3 or 4 years, how many more years of this peak level play do these guys have? Because eventually one of them might just get to be the GOAT for some people, just on that category. Like, he just played the best long stretch of League ever.
Yep, completely agree. I mean, like, it really comes down to what your criteria are. And for me, it doesn't actually matter for me about that criteria myself, because I just don't think anyone actually matches Faker on just too many metrics that, even if you discredit him in some ways with that, who is second and how close are they? I would imagine it's by quite a long margin.
Oh, I've got a good one for you. XL Golly says, with the NLC waiving the rank requirement for Forsen Plat 3, it opens the door for a summoning insight roster built around Nymaera's Ari and Thorin's trademark Pike. Which free agent / retired pros would you round out the lineup with? So we're just doing this for fun. So you're going to be mid lane on the Ari. I'll be supporting the Pike. So who are we adding to our team? Who would make a good addition?
We have an early game snowball comp already. We need someone that plays like a flashy engaged jungler. We need someone who plays like Vi really well, or just someone that can just immediately fight. Do we just full send it and just wheel out MLXG? We don't speak the same languages.
Doing the foreigners, right? Okay, could do. Listen, by the way, LXG, I can tell you right now, I would vibe with this guy's game so much, Nymaera. Essentially, Joker's just always going in, innit? I was thinking the EU version is like a self-made or something, you know, for doing some pick like that.
Oh, no. Look, I think if it's someone like MLXG, we'll never understand each other well enough to flame each other. We'll just all go in, whatever goes wrong, and I'll love the experience. Who are you playing bot lane with? You need to play someone with bot lane. This is actually the most important thing.
The key thing here is, because I'm Pike, I've made this clear. I'm not like a respectful Pike. Oh, I just leave lane if they start losing, mate. So it's going to have to be someone like, the joke is it'd have to be some fucker like, just some fucking boring, just some boring fucker who could play 1v2 and say safe in lane or something. Yeah, so maybe
I was thinking it's either two. I was thinking it's two things. One, someone who's just like completely leave them on their own, like someone like Shannon, or someone like just like they're going to exist, or someone with a forceful enough personality to actually beat you out on that and actually keep you in lane. And I can think that's only going to be him.
Because if I stay in lane, I have to know we're going to win. Or I can just fuck off, So, and then, you're right. It's either like a Yana, like, look, enjoy the Heimerdinger game, mate, I'm off.
Yeah.
Either that, or it's like, right, okay, forgive me, I'll do what you say, mate, I'll zone it now.
God. And top lane, that it has to be someone who's like, it has to be someone that's going to be a one-man island. I mean, I don't mind roaming up to top lane or whatever, but I mean, if we're playing like early game snowball with like a flashy bot lane and mid lane, they have to be someone that can sit on an island. God. I mean, there's a couple of people who play weak side top lane, right? I mean, there also needs to be someone who's happy playing weak side top lane, because so like Odo Omne, he's just gonna bitch if you like fuck up anywhere else on the map.
I mean, my joke could be, I would just bring him out. I don't care that this guy's
right, yeah,
fucking stasis in like carbonite somewhere. I'd just bring Fizzy Chachi out. You know what, mate? Listen,
Man.
you made a whole career doing this.
Sure, why not?
And MLXG doesn't even speak your language. He's never come in top lane ever. He's all day. You have to understand, essentially, in this team, this is even the coaching diagram that I'm drawing up. You do understand this whole team is MLXG doing whatever you want, as Nymaera and me just go in all the time.
Yeah.
That's all the team is. So if you are the top of the ADC, you are basically our slaves in this analogy. Like, it's not going to be fun. You're not playing League of Legends. And you're just making up for us doing our bullshit, basically.
And if we haven't won by 15 minutes, exactly. It is so doomed.
Yeah, listen, we don't ever need to skill. We'll know if we won by like 15, 20 minutes. As soon as Baron spawns, we need to have the game almost won, basically. So.
Also helps that like Chachi is one of the I've talked with the guy a bit. Like, he's one of the most chill guys out there. Even if anything goes wrong, if everything starts exploding, he is completely.
No, the joke is, it's not. He wasn't even trolling. He apparently was like super into playing like chess before that.
Yeah, he was.
He's not the mentality for it. He doesn't overreact to a misplay or a moment happening. He just keeps chugging away. So there you go.
I think that would be a very funny roster.
We'll do a couple more.
Sure.
Let me have a look here. Okay, here's a good one. Hello, Thorin and Nymaera. Just wondering if either of you have a favorite hobby or pastime outside of video games that you would like to share and talk about. So do you have one that you haven't told people about or you'd like to big up?
Well, I mean, everyone on the last episode saw a bunch of guitars hanging behind me. So yeah, music's the big one. If I didn't go into gaming, I would have liked to go into something musical. That really defined a lot of like my teenage years and stuff. So I'm big into alt rock and new metal, into classic rock. I mean, the first gig I ever went to was Deep Purple, supported by Thin Lizzy and Styx. I absolutely love like going to live music. So yeah, going to live music's a big one. I really like any kind of video game, but that's stuff outside of that, really. I used to do a lot of Warhammer when I was growing up. I've talked about that a little bit too. We talked about it on previous episodes, so I'm not sure if it counts as not talked about it before. Anime, I've mentioned this episode already. I have a lot of random hobbies which I rarely get around to. I like food, I like cooking. Cooking's a big one for me too. But I tend to cook for other people. I could keep listing off random inane things at that point. Probably music's the big one though.
I mean, on the last episode, I did basically point out via that question that I'm into like battle rap. So I guess that's
yeah.
I don't necessarily have a load of things I want to talk about. I'll just say one thing that's actually underrated about that, if anyone just happens to have any tangential interest, this might perk your interest, is if you are someone who works in any capacity on camera and you have to speak like in a freestyle manner where you associate things, put them together. Stuff like that will literally just help you at your job. Like if you see the way that eventually after watching it long enough, your brain kind of follows the patterns of like, oh, they're going to end on this sort of a rhyme or that. That actually really helps also putting together something really quickly in your own head when you're doing broadcast things. The other one I would basically say, because I have a little mini thing, I won't do a whole rant on this, I'll do a mini side thing. Basically, in the same way as I actually think anime is the most underused medium in the whole world because it's just animation. But instead, people think anime has to be, right, it's like some Japanese school kid shit with like a mech or like the have like super parts. Like, no, you made all those constraints yourself. Like they don't. The genius of anime, and this is what I'm going to tie it to. I'm a big fan of comic books as a medium, but I'm not that big a fan in the modern day. Like I never really followed specific characters. I would have always followed the writers because what I'm interested in is what you can do with it as a medium. And one thing that's actually quite cool in my adult life that I've been able to do because I have disposable income is I have actually bought quite a lot of European comics. And the cool thing about European comics is they don't have any of those rules that Americans do of like, it was only something in the 90s that they broke in America, the rules where you couldn't have like violence in the comic or you couldn't have drug taking. You basically couldn't have anything transgressive because back then there used to be a code that you had to adhere to. Yeah. Well, in European comics, they never had any of that shit anyway, man. Like they were always just doing like adult shit, like super raw things, very, let's say like very transgressive things could be featured. And actually, even their style wasn't as much to be like a certain superhero. It was more like you just have books that are about anything. They're just using the medium of art and combining script writing, basically. So I actually think that's a very underrated one because the European comics, they're totally different to everything you think of as Marvel and DC. So, like, I'd just say people can check that out, maybe. Check out Jodorowsky's stuff, etc.
Yeah, the thing is, I speak about my hobbies too much, so I don't feel like there's a lot which I don't speak about.
That was a good question.
It's a good one. Yeah.
We'll do one last question. Let me see. What's the last one going to be? Here's a good one. Perfect way to end it. So Fede says, what's the best thing you ever bought for £10 or less? There you go. That's a very specific price point, I notice. I like it.
£10 or less. Is there something which I've used day in, day out for 10 quid or less? Because I'm thinking either something which is like very... Because, I mean, I've had really good cheap meals, which I've really enjoyed.
Sure.
10 quid or less, though. That's really specific. Is there something which I haven't...
I'll tell you what mine is, because mine's just going to be food, actually. I can't really think of any like baller item, but I will say, when the people used to say to me the dreaded line, basically, when people would ask this question, I mean, they just let me know they know nothing about this topic. When I used to live 10 years ago in Korea, because I could live anywhere in the world, they would go, but why in Korea, though? And I used to tell people, the place I go to buy Korean barbecue every day, I pay $8 for my entire meal, and it's straight fire, like 10 out of 10 Korean barbecue. So like that alone's a pretty good selling point. It's $8 per time I sit down. Like that's pretty good. Yeah, it's hard to beat the $8 points.
Yeah, there's some really good food stuffs. Tell you what, this is a bit different. I can't remember if this is under 10 quid, but it's close enough, so I'll count it. I got a 2-meter long charging cable, and that changed my life because I suddenly wasn't like tied to just sitting next to the wall and my phone was low. Getting something like a 2-meter long charging cable, that's something which I use it until it breaks. I can't remember if that was under 10 quid, but that was a game changer.
Yeah, it can't be
sometimes they can be more actually if it's like a threaded cable. They can actually be, and it depends when you buy it, but I think that might be it. Yeah.
Also, if people aren't aware, if you are anyone who lacks for a cable, that's the easiest shit ever to order off the internet and have the next day at your house for fuck all money. Like, that's actually one of the few areas where globalism's helped you, boys. You'll have that shit in your house tomorrow. Like, you don't have to suffer in silence. Just get on with it. Just get a new one. Look, on any of the e-commerce platforms, they'll have a billion of them listed, mate. Just make sure
it's a legit one. And because you use them literally every day, you will notice the impact, like, massively.
Absolutely. Now, in fact, buy two. Buy two, so when it breaks, you've got one in the background.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Get them for whatever. Especially now everything's moving to like USB-C as well. Everything will be charged by that, which is really convenient. So that's probably up there. I don't actually know if it was... now I'm thinking about it, I think it was slightly more... Whatever. It's within the realm of it. Get yourself a long cable. It changes things.
It's in the spirit of the question. Okay, that'll be enough for now. Next week, there'll be loads more to discuss because we'll have the LPL coming, the LEC. We'll have everything starting up, basically. And I've no doubt by then there'll be a bunch of other drama will happen in the meantime. So we will join you for the next episode of Summoning Insight next week.